It was a day just like any other. The birds were chirping and the sun was shining high and clear above Smashville. No matches were being held that day, big surprise, so the majority of the Smashers decided to take a day out on the town. Wind of this reached the Assist Trophy Motel, and soon enough, Smashville was hustling and bustling with man, creature, and those who fell in between. I never knew the lore around these parts went so deep. Tiki joked to Pit. The duo were enjoying ice cream in the shade. It had not been dropped on the ground, no, but it was still delicious in his books. This Tabia fellow. Where did he go? He must be incredibly powerful, being that he wiped out all of you in one swoop. I really don't know what happened to Taba, Pit admitted, licking along the sides of his cone. The hand not occupying the cone rested against the stone of the fountain they rested at. Tiki's hand resided on the top of his palm. The statue depicted the original 8 Smashers standing proud. I remember Sonic coming in out of nowhere and totally saving us, and then an all-out brawl throwing down. But after that it gets a little blurry. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that we were in a little pocket dimension within a pocket dimension? I don't really know how to best explain it. The Great Maze was weird. Tiki was genuinely interested in Pit's tales of heroism. Who struck the final blow? Mario, naturally, Pit answered casually. I mean, that guy's a huge hero. I mean, bigger than big. But then again, he's down to earth enough to have a good conversation with. Overall, he's an all-around, stand-up guy. Pit gushed. A moment too late, he noticed how much he had gushed. Almost embarrassed, the angel's head turned the other way. Sorry. Mario's just cool. Tiki laughed at his reaction. Humming softly to herself, she ate a part of her own ice cream cone. Oh, don't you worry. I could go on and on and on about how awesome Marmor is. After all, he was the first one to wake me from my slumber in a long time. You and Marth go way back, don't you? Pit asked, curious about her own past. A smile stretched over Pit's face. Like me and Lady Palutena. He'll always have your back, right? Always. Visions of Pit's mangled body during the Mipocalypse came to mind. She pushed them out of her mind, a smile coming to her face instead. Of course. I know that if I ever need anything from Marmar, he'll be right there as soon as he can. Tiki's fingers drew little shapes on Pit's knuckles. Of the people she trusted on this earth, Marth was definitely in the top ranks, along with Crumb and Co., and, recently, this little angel doofus.
Some people call me a do-gooder, but is that really a bad thing?
Yes.
Hey!
Made to serve. That's the angel code. Pit cheered. He took great pride in the job he did as Palutena's lead commander. Isn't that so? Tiki asked, with a tip of the head. Isn't that a bit? I don't know. Archaic? Dark Pit doesn't seem to serve anyone. Oh, he does. He works for Viridi and the forces of nature. Though, Viridi's not exactly here in Smash, so he's a free bird, I guess. Pit shrugged.
I can still hear you.
Came Viridi's voice telepathically.
I can still boss Pit around as much as I want.
Pit smacked his ear as if he had gotten water in it. This garnered a concerned look from Tiki. Cheekily, Pit offered a grin and a shrug. Hey, sorry. I think I got a crawdad in my ear. A CR? Tiki started, only to be interrupted. She noticed a pelican with a mailbag staring intently at them. Hello? Can I help you? The mail carrier offered a salute. Of course. I have a letter here for a Mr. Pit. Like, armpit? That's me, Pit said, raising his ice cream hand. Hesitantly, he removed his hand from Tiki's. The mail carrier saluted again, before heading out. Pit carefully unwrapped the letter. Staring at the sheet, he was unable to make out any useful information. There must have been a glazed over look in his eyes, as a moment later, Tiki cast her hand before him. Pit, are you quite alright? Pit shook his head. Why yeah, just. Again, he looked at the paper, and a nervous sweat broke out over him. Were these symbols moving on their own? He let out a small groan, replacing the paper on his lap. A hand went to his head, massaging at his temples. A caring hand was at his arm, as Tiki touched him. Pit melted back a little, shaking. Pit. You're shivering. What's the matter? Pit sighed. This was the conversation he was dreading on having. Would she make fun of him? A creeping anxiety flew over him. Well? Tiki asked, her voice concerned. The angel's deep blue eyes turned to Tiki. I was never taught how to read. Never had time, training to be in the Sky World Army and all. I only had to follow the orders. Never write them out. Tiki's brows furrowed in confusion for a moment, before softening. But how do you use the group chat in the Smash communicator? Text to speech, Pit answered plainly. That, or I have someone read it to me. Things were beginning to make sense to her. Tiki's face held an expression of empathy, much to Pit's relief. I see. So that is why you never wrote me back. Pit nodded, ashamed of himself. Don't you worry, Pit. I understand. I, too, hadn't learned to read until Marmar came to me many decades ago, she told him. This surprised Pit, his eyes coming up to meet hers. Just because I'm not his oracle doesn't mean I have infinite knowledge. I was so little back then. Marth came in and taught me many things. And now, I can do the same for you. All of Pit's worries flooded away, and a happy smile graced his cheeks. Gratefully, he hugged his beloved, dropping his ice cream cone in the process. Thank you so much, he exclaimed. Now then, Tiki began, taking the letter into her hands. Pit happily retrieved his floor ice cream, looking over Tiki's shoulder at the letter. Let's get started then, shall we? Tiki skimmed the letter a moment before she began reading it. A look of worry ghosted her face. It was faint, but Pit had become a master of reading them. What? What is it? Pit asked her. Oh, nothing, nothing. This just seems to be very important, Tiki said. There was an official Smash logo embezzled on the back side of it, signifying it had come straight from the master office.
Dear all heroes, you are the hero of your world. You have traveled near and far from your acts of heroism, and this is the reason you were chosen to represent your own universe. This is a great accomplishment. We here at the Master Office commend your feats. Each one of you have proven yourself, not only in what didn't you do in our world, but in ours. We ask you a simple favor. Recently, a great tragedy overtaken us. Master Core, the youngest of our ranks, was brutally killed by a stronger force than we anticipated. Core was more than just a little ball of energy. Core was a part of us, part of the universe. Core controlled the swarm. Core had not reached its full potential, and would have been next to take our takes if something bad happened to us. We never accounted for the fact that something could have happened to Master Core. Grief-stricken, we three, Master Hand, Crazy Hand, and Xander the Announcer, have turned to fables our own and hopes that Master Core may return to us. Yes, there were once beings that inhabited this universe long before the three of us. The Old Ones, as we call them, created this timeline and in turn, us. And these fables, there was a legendary temple. This temple contained the strands of time itself. If one were to find it, they could seriously harm the flow of the universe if they were careless. Time could freeze or fast forward so quickly they would not even feel their bodies decomposing. It could also bring back Master Core with a simple reset. This is where you come in, brave heroes. The three of us do not ask very much and often. We provide housing and food and comradeship as well as you participate in our tournament. However, these circumstances are extreme, and we reach you out and your fellow heroes in desperation. We ask you to find this temple and bring back our Master Core. We understand this is a lot to take in at once, and understand if you decline. However, if you are successful on your journey, you and your fellow competitors will be rewarded handsomely. The rule set is simple. Each universe will begin 100% in the for except for the Pokemon universe and the Wii Fit universe. Both Red Leaf and Chad and Chesley have been asked to go, for there is no possibility to distinguish the two from each other with cards to head in the franchise. Your fellow Avengers are first followed as they choose, if they choose to accept our offer. Mario, Link, Samus, Green Yoshi, Kirby, Fox, Donkey Kong, Ness, Captain Falcon, Red and Leaf, with their representative, come on. Nen and Popo as their inseparable duo. Marth, Mr. Game & Watch, Pit, Wario, Solid Snake, Sonic, Captain Omar, Rob, the Mayor, Bill, Mega Man, Little Mac, Pac-Man, Shulk, both FIFA trainers, all 3 members of Dub Hunt, you too, Captain N, Ryu, Cloud, Bayonetta, Agent 3, Simon Belmont, Joker, Alice, the Swarm. Of course, there are others. There are other uses in this temple could have if it didn't exist. The damage of the apocalypse could cause to be reversed forever. Legend had that this temple is located deep within the woods surrounding the Smashers Hotel. The legend also states that there's a giant guardian, not metallic kind, that protects this temple with terrifying strength and precision. We promise to arm you as strong as we can, but our help will be of no assistance. The creature is simply too powerful. Defeating it will be up to you. Once more, we must stress that it is perfectly understandable if you wish not to journey into the wilderness. If you decide to step down, we'll replace your spot with another person. However, each of you bring a specialized skill to the table that is important to the team. If you wish, or if you wish to ratify your wrong and self-mat from esports, you must band together. If not, it almost as if not accomplishes goals, even after death. You have 1 week to think about this. Please stamp the corresponding response you wish to give. Are you in? Yes. Or no?
Mario lowered the letter he had been given, after reading it aloud. The Red Plumber had assembled a group of those who were mentioned within it to discuss their decisions. His eyes scanned across the crowd. Some faces were lit and excited, while others held a look of fear in their eyes. This is giving me some serious deja vu, Clown commented, a small shiver rolling over his body. This whole Magic bullshit temple is giving me some Temple of the Ancients vibe. Link pointed at Cloud, nodding his head in agreement. He'd stormed many a temple, or shrine, as they were called in his timeline, and this one sounded eerily similar to 1 or 2 in his world. Hopefully there would be no crazy follower lady creeping around the woods. I think it's a great idea, Falcon exclaimed. The F-Zero pilot had his feet kicked up on a chair ahead of him, his own letter sitting squarely in his lap. Think about it, guys. The hands never ask us for favors. If we help them out, they'd be really grateful. And hey, last time I checked, being on the good side of literal gods is a good thing. As many gas fumes as this guy huffs on a daily basis, I think I've got to agree with Pilot Falcon, Sonic said with a point. It's gotten really boring around here since the hands stopped the competition. If we do this for them, maybe they'll let me go back to punching Mario in the face again. This garnered a few laughs from those gathered, Mario included. You've got a point, Sonic, Mario returned. As much as I want to punch you in the face for saying that, I don't want to hurt you too bad. Sonic playfully blew a raspberry at him. What happens if we die out there? Samus asked, a hush falling over the crowd at her tone in question. There's no response, and it obviously isn't within Gohan's power to bring someone back outside of their matches. Eyes were turned around the room, as no one had an answer for that question. Just don't die? Sonic offered. We could just reset it, Snake offered. Just as we're planning to do to Master Core. However, not dying is the most optimal way to go about this. I think it's settled, then, Falcon hummed. Already, he'd stamped the yes option on his letter. I'll see you chumps later. Falcon stood to leave. That was just like him. Even though he had a week to decide, the F-Zero pilot decided to rush right on in. The rest of those gathered decided to think a little longer. 7 days was a long time. Each needed to weigh the possible outcomes of this adventure. Each had things at stake. As Tiki read through the letter with Pit, the angel's eyes began to darken. Behind them, there was a storm brewing. Pit bit at his gums to keep himself in check, the ice cream in his hand beginning to melt. Tiki finished reading the letter, and allowed a moment for it to sink in. Another grand adventure? She was certain Pit could handle it. But as she turned her eyes towards him, she could tell everything was not right. Pit? she asked, tilting her head off to the side. It was almost feline, the mannerism. Yeah, he responded. It was the only thing he could think to respond with. Yeah, sorry. That's just a lot to take in at once. Believe you me, I understand that, Tiki assured her angel. Her eyes went heavenward, the heat of the sun feeling cold against her skin. The hands. They've lost something they care deeply about. Yeah, Pit again said. There was a pit in his stomach that he couldn't unlatch. I know what that feels like. I think we all do, Tiki said. Gently once more, her fingers caressed against Pit's arm. It didn't have the same relaxing effect it had earlier. Pit remained cold. Much different from his usual, goofy self. I've seen many good men and women slain on the field of battle. I've had loss. And Pit, let me tell you, I would do anything to have them back. The hands are just the same. Except they have a way for this to happen. Images of the angels who had met their end by Medusa's gaze flashed back to Pit. He blinked them away, along with some of the emotion that had began to well in his eyes. Me too. Pit glanced down at the letter the two of them shared. Which one of these is yes? Isabel read through the letter Vil had brought to her. She read it once, then twice, and then another time. As she read it again and again, there was a sinking feeling in the secretary's chest. Vil. Isabel finally said, garnering the attention of the red-shirted villager. This must be serious. Isabel usually referred to him as Mr. Mayor, even outside of the working environment. I don't think you should go. Vil's eyebrows furrowed slightly, as he looked on at his secretary. Isabel was the creature he trusted the most on this planet or any other planet. Her word, however, were startling and confusing to him. Why wouldn't she want him to go? I've been in these woods, she explained, reminiscing on her time spent in the woods with Wolf and the other villagers. I saw the creature. I saw a creature. The creature. It was massive. Scary. I don't know if there's enough firepower to take it down. I don't want you to get hurt. She was nearly on the verge of tears. Just remembering the sickening snaps that the trees made her stomach twist painfully. Vil stared on, a churning of his own heart coming to place. She must be serious if it brought this much of an emotional reaction. However, the hands has asked specifically for him. He was needed. And he couldn't let them down. Even if Isabel didn't think the idea was a good one. Calmly, Vil came to wrap Isabel in a hug. He felt tears of his own coming to form in his eyes. I don't want you to get hurt. Isabel repeated. I won't, Vil thought to himself. But they need me. The Myfighters stared at the letter after reading the information on the paper as they looked more worried about the situation at hand. While none of the original trio wasn't chosen for this adventure, they all knew the one who had suffered from the events from before will go on another life or death scenario. I don't think you should go. Hannah, the Miggunner murmured to Alice and to herself. Despite only knowing her the months prior and after the Mypocalypse, Hannah had this weird connection with Alice, as if they have always been with each other and never apart. I have a bad feeling about this. You might not come back to us if you don't. She has a point. The Swordfighter, known as Finn, sitting up on the couch, his hands were rubbing his face as the anxiety grew further, like a virus increasingly rising by the second. Finn remembered all of the horrifying events in Mytopia when the Dark Lord stole innocent Ms. faces. Sure, they were fine after getting back, but the eerie silence and their bodies not reacting as if they were dead brings back memories Finn wanted to keep in the past. If you go there, you may die, please. For the sake of us all, don't go there and die for a orb that you didn't even know about. Alice was silent, hearing her two friends out. They have made points to why she shouldn't go. Just like the Mypocalypse, there wasn't a predetermined fate for her, and she was going to unknown territory to time travel where the so-called core wouldn't die. But she also knew that this is an opportunity to return a promise she made to a friend of hers that perished at the end of Matt's reign. Thank you all, truly. I get why you're scared, and you're right, Finn. Alice said. She looked at Hannah, and then looked at Finn. I know nothing about this core person thing. But I'm not just going for that. I'm keeping a promise that I will never, ever break. As long as I draw breath, I will find a way to restore Kate, and my other friends. The two Ms. can see the determination in Alice's eyes, but even so doubt was in the room. Please. Hannah all could say as she grabs Alice's hands in front of her. If we lose you too, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Hannah saw. The mid-brawler was silent throughout this whole conversation. Despite Finn and Hannah's worries, Saul knew when Alice spoke her motivation, she was going to keep it no matter what anyone said. And how could he not? This was Alice, his training partner, rival, and friend. You should let her go, guys. The brawler said. The Miz looked back at him in surprise. Don't you think trying to stop her at this moment is being a bit selfish? Look at her, she's determined and there is nothing we can do to stop her. Don't get me wrong, I'm worried too, but something tells me in my gut that she'll come back safe, with Kate by her side. Alice could almost cry, when the swordfighter and gunner stopped her, only the brawler believed in her with undying trust. From this, Finn and Hannah sighed and looked at Alice. He's right, Hannah murmured, just don't do anything reckless, alright? I don't want to come back and you're not here with us again. Us are in this together, no matter what. She hugged Alice in a tight squeeze. Despite it hurting a bit, she returned the hug but patted her on the back to make it stop. After apologizing from Hannah, Alice turned to Finn to see what he said. In truth, I kind of knew despite our points against it, you would have gone anyway. What a fool I was. There was a hint of sadness in Finn's words. On my honor as a knight, I pray that you return to us safely, and to do that, he removed the strap that was connected to the hilt of his sword and gave it to Alice. You will need more assistance. Alice didn't know what to say about this kindness and unexpected offering of Finn's own sword. At first she didn't want him to sacrifice something he needed, but because of what happened earlier, she knows that it'll take everything that she has. She accepts Finn's blade and bows to him. Lastly, she looks at Saul, his eyes filled with the same determination as she is. He reaches out his hand, waiting for a response. Don't go dying out there, Alice. He smirked. The confidence in his voice can motivate a group of children. We still have a score to settle. With that, she shook Saul's hand as a promise to keep with a list of promises she made to Finn, Hannah, Saul, and Kate. When the week was up, no one had checked no. The dawn was breaking over the horizon. The early morning sun kissed the green landscape and buildings that occupied the same universe. The golden radiance of the astral unit was a breath of life of all that took it in on this fine morning. However, it also marked what could be seen as certain death for a specific number of heroes. Pit hadn't slept much that night. This wasn't for lack of trying. No, in fact, Pit tried really hard to get a good night's rest. Gods knew he needed it. Tiki seemed to have no problem falling asleep. Within a few minutes of being in bed, the manaked was out like a light. She made sleeping look easy. Perhaps because she had spent a long majority of her life doing it. Pit stirred in his restlessness. His mind was a blur of possible outcomes that the upcoming adventure could have on him and his fellow band of heroes. Off and on Pit found sleep. Dreamless. This, he later thought, must have been a blessing by some higher power than he. Who knows what he would have conjured up in the restlessness of the night. When enough time passed, Pit decided he needed to get up. He needed to leave the bed and stretch his back. His legs. His wing. His everything. He needed to be up and doing something. As quietly as he could, Pit stood, and began to pack what he would need for the journey that was ahead of him. He packed light. Surely others would bring supplies that would allow them to set up camp if needed. Vil and Snake were experts in that department. Instead, Pit grabbed the essentials. His swords. His rings for his arrows. A stash of food in case worse came to worse. His mind flashed briefly to Kirby, and he packed more treats from his stash. Gods only knew that the little world eater would want some of his. Briefly, Pit turned back to his beloved, who still was sound asleep in the bed. Of course, she was not in the most complimentary position. Hardly anyone slept like a model. Unless you were Mario, that is. That guy had his sleeping stance down pat. Her dark green hair stuck to her face in all kinds of strange places. A line of drool caressed her cheek. Her arms sprawled all across the bed, as if she were giving a measurement of her wingspan. Pit couldn't help but smile. Hesitantly, he approached the bed. He stopped, however, as he spied the clock on the bedside table. 4:58 a.m. A little early for that. Tiki did enjoy her sleep, all right. Pit hadn't even left yet, but already he felt so lonesome he could die. The months had flown by when he was with her. Pit believed, with her, he found something greater than happiness. Serving Lady Palutna to the best of his ability gave him happiness. Pestering and teasing Pit who brought him happiness. Leading the Sky World Army gave him happiness. He could fully proclaim that Tiki gave him love. He'd never felt this strongly for anyone in his life, not even Lady Palutna herself. Once more, Pit approached, this time on soft feet. He was mindful of the noise he made, wishing not to awaken the sleeping man naked. Gently, his fingertips moved the strands of green from her face. Tiki let out a sleepy murmur of nonsense, slightly adjusting herself in her state of altered consciousness. The angel's heart bounded with every movement she made. Softly, Pit moved to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. In her sleep, Tiki made another babble of nothingness. However, Pit swore he saw a smile curl at her lips. Maybe it was the darkness playing tricks on him, but he could swear by it. I'll see you in a few days, Pit assured her. Softly, he turned to the door of his hotel room. Strapping on his sandals and throwing his sash over his shoulder, Pit gave one last look over his shoulder at his beloved, before heading off into the great unknown. Oh, how he hated to go. But he knew that he must. Agent 3 was not unfamiliar with make it or break it type missions. She'd been through the thickest parts of the underbelly of the world, and seen some serious shit. This mission would be no different than those she faced in her own world. Why, then, did she feel a lingering sense of anxiety? It was nothing major. A slight ping of fear here or there, but nothing unmanageable. It was alien, yes, but that didn't mean it would be something she couldn't deal with. Entering the commons, she found that her fellow Inklings were awaiting her arrival. In all honesty, this startled Lemon. She blinked twice, before tilting her head off to the side. Do you all have no concept of time? She asked them. It's like 5 in the morning. After making her presence known, Agent 3 was nearly tackled to the ground by the gaggle of Inklings. Again, another surprise for the usually stoic hero of Inkopolis. Promise me you'll be careful, Cyan exclaimed, nearly crying. The youngest Squid Kid was extremely emotional. I want to hear all about your adventures when you get back, Bloom exclaimed. You're gonna beat the crap out of that temple, right? Asked Pink. Lemon had to push herself away from her friends to get a moment to breathe. She didn't realize she was this loved among her ranks. The worst part of it all might be that she cared much more than any of them ever would. Right, yeah, you've got my seal of approval, Agent 3 promised her friends. Just don't burn the hotel to the ground while I'm gone, okay? There'll be shell to pay, ya hear? The Inklings agreed enthusiastically, giving one last group hug to the yellow girl. Lemon made her way towards the loading area, reflecting on what she had just experienced. She wiped a tear out of her eye. She would come back successful. For them, if nothing else. Mario's head turned, as he fastened his best pair of gloves onto his hands. Snugly, they fell in over his knuckles. The white article protected his hands from the powerful fire he managed to expel from himself. As he looked, he spied his kid brother coming towards him. Mario couldn't help but smile. Luigi. I never thought I'd see you awake before noon. Mario teased. Happily, he embraced his brother in a hug, patting him heartily on the back as he did. Luigi did just the same, sporting a similar smile on his own face. What can I say? Luigi asked. Meatball trailed not far behind, looking up at the two Mario brothers with curious, yet empathetic eyes. I'm full of surprises, ain't I? Oh yeah. Mario chuckled. His thumbs went to the hems of his overalls, rocking softly on the balls of his feet. After a moment or so, the older Mario bro reached down to pat at the cat that circled his feet. Meatball let out an affectionate purr. After a beat, Luigi spoke. Another life-risking adventure, eh Mario? I thought we came to Smash to get away from those. Mario couldn't help but laugh. When duty calls, you gotta answer to the call, Luigi. It don't matter what world you're in. Luigi nodded his head to that, his eyes falling downwards. He responded warmly. You know? That's something I've always been jealous of. What's that? Mario asked. Your bravery. Heroism. How you're always so ready to hit the road and go help, no matter what. Mario was touched by this. He gave Luigi a hearty slap on the shoulder. It's what's right. The hands. They've lost someone close to him. I'ma do whatever I can to help him out wherever I can. Luigi nodded. It is right, he agreed. Another pause occurred. I'ma miss you round to tell, bro. Don't you worry about it, Luigi, Mario reassured. I'ma be back in you a few days, you hear? You gotta be careful, Luigi warned. I hear there's a scary monster in the woods. Don't you worry, old chap. Cappy said suddenly. Luigi had gotten more used to Cappy's sudden intrusions, but that didn't mean he didn't flinch when Mario's had suddenly sprouted eyes. Meatball, too, skittered away. I'll make sure your brother returns in tip-top shape. Mario rustled Cappy, grinning to himself. See? Everything's gonna be okie dokie. If you say so, Luigi hummed. His eyes rose to his brother's fiery blues. Timidly, Luigi opened his arms once more. One more hug? For the road? Mario was glad to accept it. At 6 o'clock a.m., the heroes were given the cue to leave. Out into the forest they wandered, leaving the Smash Hotel behind them like a distant memory. By noon of the day, the posse of heroes had gotten themselves successfully lost. That was the whole point of this operation, wasn't it? To dig deep into the forest of the surrounding lands to try and discover this mythical temple of legends? Surprisingly, it was the Duck Hunt duo that led the way for the other Smashers. With his nose to the ground, the dog followed a path that the other fighters would not have thought to go down. The duck quacked lowly, trying to scare off any wildlife that lurked in the dense bushes. It had varying degrees of success. Ah! Get it off! Captain Falcon squealed, swatting at his padded shoulders. Along the metallic fittings crawled a remarkably large spider. The 8 beady eyes seemed to stare directly into the captain's soul. Thinking on his feet, Oliver did what he always did when faced with a situation like this. He tossed one of his Pikmin at the creature. For once, the red Pikmin was larger than the being it was attacking, and took out the spider without much thought. However, it continued to swat away at the F-Zero pilot. Get it off! Falcon whined. He tried to pluck the Pikmin off of himself, but never managed to. Oliver smirked to himself. Good. Serves him right for subspace. Eventually it was Rob who plucked the plant off of the captain's back. The robot was surprisingly gentle to the little creature, placing it back down beside Oliver. Oliver gave an appreciative thumbs up. Marth sighed. Couldn't I have been given a more competent party? Falcon, hearing this, went on the defensive. Hey! What do you mean? I know how to party. Threw him all the time back in my college days. Marth blinked wordlessly at the other. Wonderful. A regular brainlet. What more did he expect? Hours had passed since the heroes left the confines of the mansion and headed off into the world. And the exhaustion of walking for so long was beginning to settle in, especially in the children tasked with coming with. You know, it might be a little too late to suggest this now. But maybe, just maybe, bringing with some kind of flying machine would have been a good idea. Captain Falcon suggested. He gave Fox a pointed look. Defensively, Fox rose his hands. Whoa, hey! I thought the hands said we had to walk. To be fair, Marth interjected, sick of hearing this all, trying to fly through here may not be the best idea. The giant thing would have a much easier time spotting us. If it's even real, Sonic added. The blue hedgehog had his suspicions. Right, yes, if it's real, Marth agreed. Captain Falcon stopped in his tracks. So, you're telling me this all might be for nothing? Well, yes. It could be, Marth explained. It was in the letter. You did read it, didn't you? No. I half-assedly listened to Mario explain it. Again, Marth sighed deeply. The denseness of this man knew no bounds. What's the matter? Chad asked the group, as he and his wife met the stopped fighters. Are you tiring of walking? I'm tired of the bull, Falcon muttered under his breath. I didn't notice a bull, Chelsea muttered, confused. At this point, many fighters were stopped in their tracks, reevaluating the situation they had gotten themselves into. The Duck Hunt duo stopped pushing forward, instead opting to tilt its head at the group. I, too, need a break, Marth groaned. The sun is beginning to set. I say we set up camp here for the time being. The idea sounded wonderful. Idly, Mario cooked a meal over the fire of the camp. The sun was beginning to set, and they had just managed to get this makeshift campsite up and running. Mario, being the man of many talents that he was, offered to cook supper for a number of hungry fighters. Taking a hot dog out of the food stash they had been gifted, he began to cook. His eyes were not watching the hot dog, however. They were instead cast elsewhere. In fact, they focused entirely on a member of their squadron. An odd choice. I don't know how much I trust the swarm, Mario told Link, who was busy whittling away at a log with the Master Sword. Link glanced up at Mario, before whittling once more. He had no memory of the strange cloud, so why should he bother? Mario's hot dog started on fire, but he did not notice. He watched the strange, almost uncanny movements of the swarm. The blackness floated beside a number of fighters, as if inspecting them. Scanning them for weaknesses, or insecurities. It floated beside Ness, before heading to Samus. Samus must have been thinking the same thing as Mario, as she gave the swarm a stink eye. It's hard to think Master Core controlled that, Mario mused. It seems so. Otherworldly. 2 floating hands and a disembodied voice are okay, though, Link thought sarcastically. However, he didn't open his mouth to say anything. He looked to his creation for a moment. From memory, it was a pretty good rendition of his world Zelda. The nose could use a little work, though. Floating beside Vil, the swarm began to move rather erratically. It spotted something within the villager's psyche that intrigued it. Vil hadn't noticed at first. He was too busy watching the dirt Ness was poking at. But after a moment or two, he spied the strange movements of the strange being. It would be a lie to say he wasn't afraid. It startled the youngster to see Isabelle standing behind him. Or, well, Master Shadow. The swarm must have found something in its memory that allowed it to return to the shape of Isabelle. However, without Master Core, there was no personality behind it. Only a husk. Nevertheless, Villa was happy to see Isabelle. Even if it wasn't her. Don't see that every day, Snake mused, patting at the back of the brown dog that lay on his lap. Hunt the dog was out like a light, and Duck sat perched on his shoulder. At this point, Mario's glove had caught on fire. He didn't notice at first, instead still focused on the swarm. However, he did soon realize, and shook it out. A few mild curses passed his lips. Suddenly, Rob and Mega Man began to sputter. The swarm, too, dispersed back into its individual parts, dusting Master Shadow Bell in the process. What in the world? Red asked, confused. Rob? Rob. Speak to me, baby. Falcon exclaimed, dropping his burger on the ground. He ran to the side of his companion. Are you hurt, buddy? Oh, Papa Falcon'll fix you right up. Just let me. Guys? Samus said. Her voice was all but a whisper. The tint of fear in her voice was alien, and sent a shiver through the spines of everyone present. If Samus was afraid, shit was about to go down. The bounty hunter pointed. I think we've got a problem. A big problem. It can't be that. Sonic stopped, as he followed her pointing. There, crunching its way through the trees, standing tall enough to knock the sun out of its orbit, stood the guardian of the Reset Temple. Its piercing gaze planted itself right on their camp. The heroes looked onward, as the creature of nightmares towered above them. The sickening crunching of the trees made the guardian of the Reset Temple's presence that much more known. A purple gleam, close to the consistency of fire, shone brightly in the grotesque holes where eyes should belong. Moss and foliage hung loosely around the face and neck of the creature, its skinny body housing multiple appendages for tearing trees. In the camp, it was quiet enough to hear a pin drop. Not a single one of the heroes present made any sound, aside from the low buzzing escaping from Rob and Mega Man. The creature gave off a strong aura. An aura that distorted the workings of the fighters. Robotics, communicators, even telepathy were no match for the strong field created by the Guardian's intense being. A low rumbling made itself known. The creature stared at them, before its mouth opened wide. An inhuman screech escaped, as it started its attack on the fighters. The fighters screamed right back, before charging at the insurmountable foe. The battle was soon underway. Rob, buddy. You gotta get out there. Come on, show him your moves. Captain Falcon wove a hand in front of Rob's eyes. The robot displayed a green error message, and stayed completely unmoving. The captain tried to push Rob from the spot that his tracks were anchored, to no avail. Things were getting hazardous. The creature proved to be much stronger than anyone had anticipated, even the hands themselves. Falcon grit his teeth, digging his feet into the soft soil under his feet. Rob was the one he had connected with the most while he was here. There was no way he'd let his greatest creation stand around and be massacred. Falcon. What are you doing? Snake shouted. Lobbing grenades, the soldier was able to keep the branches the Guardian had summoned off of him for the time being. However, unlike a regular tree, these branches did not break. Just a minute. Douglas shouted. Come on, you hunk of crap. Move. The creature's eyes shone to where Captain Falcon was. The sickly purple light struck a fear into Douglas that he had never once known in his life. Any semblance of cockiness or self-esteem were gone. From the being's back sprouted more spindly, rough branches, zooming to the position that Captain Falcon was standing. As if by reflex, Douglas dodged to the side. The attack landed squarely on the ground, shaking the earth on which he walked. The captain almost toppled, only hardly managing to keep his footing. The being was moving closer, plucking trees out of the ground as if they were simple blades of grass. In its 6 arms, it hoisted 6 trees, using them to swat and swipe at the fighters that surrounded it. With each strike, the ground itself shook, as if in an earthquake. The Guardian stepped closer, a massive foot planting itself inches away from where Douglas had rolled. The other stomped right on top of Rob, sending the robot spiraling into different parts all across the battlefield. Rob! Falcon shouted in anguish. Hot tears stung at the man's cheeks. It was the first time he felt this emotion of overwhelming sadness exploding in him since his time as an active bounty hunter. So many pointless lives lost. Rob was dead. His robotic operating buddy was reduced to nothing more than shrapnel on the battlefield. Anger soon followed. It shot through Falcon like hot fire. Hotter than fire. Every ounce of blood in him was burning. exploding. That bastard had just killed his friend. And Falcon was about to put it in its place. "You motherfucker!" Douglas shouted at the top of his lungs, charging as fast as his legs could carry him. Faster than his top speed, Captain Falcon sprinted into battle. All the world around him seemed to blur. From his own tears or the speed of his attack, he was unsure. "Doug, no!" Samus yelled. Captain Falcon didn't hear her shout. In fact, he didn't hear anything. Momentarily distracted by Falcon's mad dash, Samus took her eyes off the assault that was coming her way. A spindly number of branches had constructed itself into a giant blunt object, preparing to crush the bounty hunter where she stood. "Samus, look out!" a voice shouted. Who it was unknown to the bounty hunter, but by that time, it was too late. Samus was crushed, her power suit doing nothing to stop her bones from being reduced to powder.
No!
Reaching the behemoth, Captain Falcon jumped. He crawled up the creature in a blind fury, like a squirrel going after a walnut. He dodged left and right, escaping the creature's desperate attempts to remove the ant from its body. Eventually, Captain Falcon reached the head. "This one's going right through the head of yours, you fucking creep," he shouted. Winding up his fist, he prepared his signature move. Falcon Punch. The fiery punch landed squarely on the Guardian's forehead. However, it didn't have the effect Falcon had been hoping for. There was some light recoil, yes, but the being overall seemed unfazed. Falcon Punch, Falcon Punch, Falcon Punch. One after another, Douglas landed the fiery attack. It looked as if there were fireworks exploding from his fist after each successful hit. The beam, however, did not seem fazed at all by Falcon's assault on its forehead. In fact, it only seemed to agitate the eldritch creature. Falcon P. Suddenly, there was a shooting pain in Douglas's chest. It wasn't heartbreak. No. It hurt far worse than being turned down for dinner, or being cheated on. His breath was physically taken away in a less than optimal way. Choking on air, his hands soon went to clutch at his heart. Only for something to stop it. Looking down, Douglas found that he had been impaled. In true Falcon style, Douglas smiled as death came to greet him. Huh. Ain't that a hard stalker? It was. In a few moments, the pain in his chest stopped, as Falcon's lifeless body plummeted from the top of the 15-story tall creature. Things were not looking good for the heroes. Not good at all. As Joker looked around, he saw his friends dropping left and right. Adults, kids, animals. This thing had no remorse. Death was all around him, and Ren knew that if he didn't act quickly, he'd meet it sooner than he wanted to. Ness looked rather serene beside the tree he'd been cast to. After valiantly running in to stop an assault on Duck and Hunt, the being picked up the child and tossed him. Hard and far Ness had flown, before crashing painfully into a nearby tree. Gently, Joker pushed his eyelids closed. He was a good kid. He didn't deserve this kind of death. Joker was going to ensure that it wasn't in vain. Calm, the Phantom Thief shouted. The gorilla, who was fighting off enough twisting vines to crush an elephant, turned his head. Joker's eyes met his. Throw me. Donkey Kong didn't need to be told twice. Seeing no better way, DK mustered all the strength he could to throw the deadly assault off of himself. Picking up the teenager with one arm, DK readied himself. With a triumphant howl, the king of DK Island threw Joker. However, the Kong had used all of his strength. Exhausted, he all but collapsed on the field of battle. He didn't even struggle as the vines enclosed his throat. Joker soared through the air, expertly dodging where he needed to avoid the traffic of the busy battlefield. He nicked Mario's cap, flew by a sun salutation, and over the metallic remains of Robin Mega Man. Shooting a grappling hook from his sleeve, Ren hooked the backside of the Guardian's leg, using his momentum to swing and wrap around the giant, tree trunk-like legs of the being. For a moment, Joker thought his plan was going to work. He went around and around and around, wrapping the legs tightly. It didn't work. The rope of the grappling hook snapped, as the Guardian's legs sharpened to knives of bark. With a surprised shout, the young Phantom Thief went soaring through the air again, painfully crashing into the ground feet away from where he had been. Joker. Ren, dazed and confused, wasn't able to comprehend the giant foot that would crush him out of existence. This thing was out to kill them all. And most likely it would, too. Nothing at all seems to faze it, and its attacks keep ramping up in severity. Nana. Papa groaned in the arms of his sister. He'd been struck pretty good. A large gash was cut through his parka, and the bleeding was intense. Icing it was not an option, as freezing that much blood would freeze the May Lice climber's internal organs. Papa. I am here, Nana got out, on the verge of tears. Don't say anything. You're gonna be okay. Okay. Paco murmured. You know, this reminds me of climbing a mountain, Nana said, surprisingly clearly. However, after she finished, she burst into tears. Paco managed a pained smile, as the infinite glacier up above came clearer and clearer to him. Charizard. Flare Blitz. Squirtle. Hydro Pump. Ivysaur. Solar Beam. Squirtle. Ice Beam. Charizard. Fire Blast. Ivysaur. Sludge Bomb. Red and Leaf were exerting their Pokémon to their maximum potential. The elemental trio of Fire, Grass, and Water stung at the Guardian, but the Guardian remained unmoved. Sonic was doing a pretty good job of distracting it for the time being, but, soon enough, it turned its eyes towards Red and Leaf. Uh-oh, the usually confident Red murmured. A spike of anxiety flew through him as that purple glare hit where the Pokémon trainers stood. Leaf was all but shaking in her tennis shoes. It's looking at us, Red. What do we do? Red came up dry. He hadn't a clue. The destructive force had them in their sight. What were they supposed to do? Charizard. They shouted in unison. Both of the fire and flying types looked back to their trainers. The Pokémon were getting tired. But they knew they needed to protect the ones who had raised them. Fly. Both Charizards took to the sky. The two of them circled about, gathering the attention of the beast. With a loud roar, the dragons dove, and smacked the being right in the forehead. Awesome. Red shouted. Again. Leaf implored. It was more of a beg than anything. They did. Again and again, Red and Leaf's Charizard attacked. However, the creature remained unmoved. Taking a massive tree, the Guardian swung. A sickening whack was heard, as Leaf's Charizard was knocked out of the sky. Charizard. Leaf screamed, appalled. Helplessly, she watched as her most powerful Pokémon plummeted like a shooting star. Red's Charizard, just as appalled, dove behind the other, abandoning his trainer's orders. Leaf's Charizard landed on top of Red. Ouch. The male trainer let out a breathy sigh, as he was driven to the ground by the plummeting Pokémon. Red's Charizard moved Leafs off of his trainer. Red was knocked unconscious by the blow but, thankfully, was still breathing. The same could not be said about Leaf's Charizard. The two Squirtles and Ivysaurs rushed to the side of the red dragon, nudging it as if to try and awaken it from its slumber. Leaf, however, sat in awe. One hand was clasped firmly on her mouth. Her eyes were streaming hot with fresh tears, as her eyes focused on the tail of the large Pokémon. Memories of Charizard as a Charmander flashed in her mind. From the egg she had hatched, to his first battle, to his eventual evolution into Charmeleon and then Charizard. Good memories. Great memories. Leaf stared at the tail of the creature. There was no fire burning. Bayonetta was a lot of things. She was a woman. She was an Umbra witch. She was the overall champion of the last tournament, securing more wins than every other fighter on the roster. She was a jokester. She was someone not afraid to flaunt who she was, and do what was needed to get what she wanted. A field medic, however, was something that she was not. The same was true about the legendary Simon Belmont. He was a man. He was a vampire hunter. He was a newcomer who was making headlines for himself and his unique style of fighting, save Richter. He was a smart and compassionate person, especially when with someone he loved. Ironically, that's right where he was now. In the arms of the woman that he loved. With a giant hole in his chest and bleeding everywhere. "Don't you die on me, Simon Belmont," Bayonetta commanded. Were those tears stinging at the corners of her eyes? "Don't you even think about it. I've met with death before, and I was not a fan of it," Simon managed to joke. His voice sounded far away and quiet. He forced himself to smile at his own joke, even if it hurt. Bayonetta didn't smile. "Hold still. Stop talking. I'll see what I can." Simon shushed her, shaking his head. "Lady Bayonetta, I believe this may be our last few moments together. And while my heart is exposed like this, I wish to share something with you." "What did I say about thinking about dying?" she exclaimed. Simon shushed her again. The lights were fading once more, and what might be for the final time. Again, he forced a smile. I love you." What a cheesy, corny, no good set of last words. Bayonetta absolutely broke down. "Lady Palutena? Lady Palutena." His shouts fell on deaf ears, as the aura surrounding the fighters prevented any communications with the outside world. Communication with goddesses was off limits to him here, and Pit could swear he was going mad. Help! Help! We're dying out here. Again, there was nothing. Only the grunts of those still alive and well. Alice and Marth cut and slashed away at parts of the giant's body, but the overpowered creature seemed to feel nothing. Mario rode Yoshi into battle, valiantly fighting a creature they had no hopes in defeating. Pac-Man had met his demise, and was cast aside like a deflated basketball. Even Kirby seemed to be getting tired. The pink puffball was only sluggishly pounding against the vile being. Lady Palutena. Get down. Pit was tackled to the ground by Snake, as a sharp appendage swept inches away from Pit's head. A whoosh was heard, and a rush of wind followed. What the hell do you think you're doing? Snake yelled. A shadow was forming above them. Something was moving quickly in a downward motion, towards the two heroes on the ground. Pit and Snake let out screams, as they believed their lives would come to an end. Seconds passed, and the duo continued their screaming. They cowered together, huddled against each other for protection. A moment later, Pit opened one eye, spying above them a blanket of black holding the blunt object above them. The swarm had saved their lives. All right. Pit shouted triumphantly. I knew you'd help us. Snake pushed Pit away, diving soon after. The swarm dispersed, allowing the Guardian to pound into the ground. We can't kill this thing. Sonic shouted. We need to get out of here, and fast. We need to find that temple. A terrified Phil vigorously shook his head, wanting nothing more than to leave this place as quickly as he could. Maybe he should have listened to Isabelle. As quickly as they could, the heroes assembled their remaining numbers. They had been dwindled, that was for sure. The creature did not seem even a little winded, but Little Mac did. If it wasn't for Sonic, the bruiser from the Bronx would have been a decoration of a tree. Breathlessly, Little Mac thanked the hedgehog, who hastily said something about putting it on his tab. Shoveling apples into his mouth, Link also managed to get from his far corner of the battlefield to the protective arms of his teammates. Moving as swiftly as they could, the heroes moved as a unit to escape the vicious attack of the Guardian. They had a temple to find. Deeper and deeper the heroes fled into the forest, trying with all their might to escape the monstrosity that hunted them down. As fast as their legs could take them, the remaining ducked and weaved through the foliage. The being's gaze stayed upon them. Something about that purple gaze allowed anxiety like no other to settle in the place of rational thinking. Adrenaline fueled the mad dash to escape. Luckily, the Guardian was big, but not fast. It plucked trees from the ground with terrifying ease, but even still, the monstrous footsteps seemed to be getting further and further away. In a rage, the Guardian sent a shrill shriek through the air, pounding the trees together. After what felt like hours of running, the heroes were convinced they had escaped the threat that had taken so many of their numbers. In a collective group, each member seemed to nearly pass out, collapsing against a tree or rock to steady themselves. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting an eerie red glare over the landscape. With bated breath, the heroes listened as the stomping of the creature seemed to fall further and further behind them. Agitated screams escaped it occasionally, as it vainly scourged the earth in its attempt to find any more trespassers. After another long beat, Mario finally spoke up. I think we lost it. What the hell even was that thing? Sonic shouted. He was immediately shushed. The Guardian, Cloud muttered, matter-of-factly. The pointy-haired soldier was nursing a wound on his arm, which was bleeding pretty good. He wrapped a cloth around it to slow the shedding of his own blood. Didn't you read the letter? That's the thing that scares even the hands. If I'm honest, I was kind of banking on it not being real, Fox sighed out. The pilot himself had seen his better days. A welt the size of an apple popped from his forehead, obscuring his vision. Link offered him an apple. It was an offer Fox turned down. I think we all were, Chad said softly. His heart was filled with grief. In his arms, he carried the still body of his wife. There were erratic breaths escaping Chelsea's mouth, but a deep cut was made just under her collarbone. Deep down, Chad knew she wasn't going to make it, but he refused to believe it. Why her? Why couldn't have he been the one to take the beating? Set her down, Clown said apologetically. I must keep her head at a solid 45-degree angle to ensure breathing, Chad said in his wee-fit voice. It was a way he could cope with the inevitable. Please, Cloud implored. Chad reluctantly agreed. Sympathetically, Rit patted a man on the back. Relatively speaking, the street fighter had escaped unscathed. I'm sure she's going to a better place. Chad had to fight against himself to not weep. It was a battle he was obviously losing. Chin up, Buttercup. Sonic expressed, his voice as snarky as always. It was a stark contrast to the quieter, mournful expressions everyone else held on themselves. You've got to keep yourself together. No time to be moping around. We've got a mission. You speak like death is no consequence, hedgehog. This man just lost his wife, Rish shot back harshly. WH. Do you hear yourself right now? Death can't jack. Sonic exclaimed. Where are we going? Oh yeah, duh. The Reset Temple. You know, that place that lets you reset what happened? All those guys out there who died? They aren't dead. We'll bring them and that core guy back, and everything will be just fine. So, quit your crying, and let's move. It took a moment for this to sink in. The realization hit like a sack of bricks. If they could manage to get into the temple and reset everything like the hands had instructed them to, all of this pointless death could be undone. That is, if they could live to tell the tale. Does anyone know where we're going? Fox asked, trying to rally the support once more among his comrades. Everyone looked at each other, shaking their heads. Well, do we have anyone who can fly up and take a look around? Fox asked. He pointed a finger at Pit. You, Angel. You've got wings. Check it out. Me? Pit asked. I can't fly. I see you do it all the time. What the hell are you talking about? Cloud asked aggressively. I can only fly with Lady Palutena's gift of flight, and I can't get it unless she gives it to me. He explained. I've been calling out for her, but I've got nothing. An angel who can't fly. Absurd, Rue muttered. That's like my whole thing. Pit groaned, exhausted. Yoshi? Fox asked. Yoshi shook his head, for he cannot fly. Alright, fine. Fox muttered. An idea came to him. Oop. I got it. He turned to the Pokemon trainer duo. Red was still unconscious, riding on the backside of his Charizard. Leaf had a dull, vacant look about her. Leaf, we need your help. Hop on your Charizard and go check out the... Leaf burst into tears again, before fleeing to a different section of the heroes. Fox and the rest of them watched her go. What's her deal? Fox wondered aloud. Mario started, awkwardly scratching under his cap. I think the thing got her. Her Charizard. Fox felt immediate regret. Shit. Now I just look like an asshole. Red Squirtle headbutted the backside of Fox's head, before vigorously shaking his head at the other. The Pokemon went to go cheer up Leaf to the best of their ability. As Fox was rubbing the backside of his head, Kirby and the Duck Hunt duo waddled up to the encampment. All eyes went to Fox, right? Fox murmured. Why didn't I think of that? Kirby it was, then. Kirby and the Duck flew up into the sky, in search of this legendary reset temple. If the Guardian was a real thing, then the temple itself had to be real, right? As far as Kirby could tell, no. No, it did not. Trees filled Kirby's vision. All around, the landscape of the forest retained its aura of mystery and intrigue. No giant stone temple. No giant temple of any kind. Only a crippling feeling of being lost. Kirby could not even see the hotel from where he floated. The Star Warrior let out a saddened sigh, as he turned to his duck friend. The duck was quacking like a madman, as it stared down at the forest floor. There was someone down there. Away from the group. There was a clearing, where no trees had grown. An oddity in the vastness of the forest that shone pure brown with dead grass. Curious, Kirby went to investigate. Somehow, Wario had survived the attack from the Temple Guardian. Perhaps from pure muscle or perhaps from simply not wanting to die, Wario had survived the fall he had received by the many hands of the beast. Did it hurt when he fell from heaven above? You bet your ass it did. He cratered hard enough to create, well, a crater in the ground. But had he lived? Of course he did. He was Wario. He was a one-man cockroach infestation. Groaning and gripping his head, Wario crawled out of the hole in the ground. Did the world always spin that fast? Probably not. The plumber stumbled around the forest floor, until he finally reached a clearing in the dense shrubbery that allowed the sun to shine on his face. It was a welcome experience. Being covered in sweat and cold blood really lowered one's body temperature. With a deep sigh, Wario fumbled around to find a rock to sun himself on. Moving his best assets to sit, he did just that. Wario sat, his weight being forced upon a specific rock in the middle of the clearing. And it moved. With a startled wah, Wario jumped off of the rock. But it had already been set in motion. Down the rock descended into the deep unknown. A low rumble was heard, as the pit grew larger and larger. Wario stumbled back, making a ton of noise in the process. This alerted the other heroes, who soon rushed to see what the problem was. Kirby and Duck floated down to their side as well, inspecting the tunnel to the underground. A puff of particles puffed up from the ground, signifying the age of this tunnel. There was no way some kid came along and dug this. No. This was as old as the Smash universe itself. Remarkable, Marth mused, rubbing his chin. Hiding the temple underground. That's ingenious. I would have never found it. That was a boost to Wario's confidence. Wahaha. Count yourself lucky, punk. Wario saves stay again. Wario's a num. Suddenly, Wario was plummeting down the hole in the ground. Snake's boots soon returned to the ground. Each of the heroes gave Snake a glare, to which Snake shrugged. What? You were all thinking it. Don't hate me just because you're jealous. Well, this is it. I hope, Bayonetta said sadly, staring down into the pit. The hole might have been in Simon's heart, but it felt as if she, too, had been stabbed. Don't worry, gentlemen. Ladies first. Bayonetta was the next to jump. Then, Cloud. Then, Agent 3. Soon enough, every single member of the party had descended down into the hole that was the Reset Temple. The heroes were not the only one alerted by Wario's shouts, however. Ominously, the Temple Guardian loomed close behind. Something's not right. It was the mood of those still around in the Smash Hotel, but it was Palutena who finally came out right and said what everyone was thinking. The hotel had an aura about it that cut through the air like a fillet knife through fish. Everyone was on edge. Even the Villains Club, who was at first ecstatic to have the heroes gone, had fallen into the tenseness that the hotel had fallen into. Palutena had tried to contact her angel multiple times since he'd set off into the forest a few days back, but as of current, she had heard nothing in return. No snarky comments. No asking for guidance. Zilch. It was as if he'd been cut off entirely from her telepathy, and it scared the ever-loving daylights out of a goddess of light. She lost all her other angels to Medusa. If Pit falls out there in the field, she would feel absolutely awful. She'd never be able to forgive herself. I assumed the same, Mutuo telepathically communicated. The sudden voice in Palutena's head made her jump. That deep baritone was much different from Pit's high tenor. I am unable to communicate with the party out in the field. This had never happened before. Me either, Palutena murmured softly. The goddess fidgeted in her seat. Why couldn't have she been selected to go out? A goddess could do whatever an angel could. And often to a better degree of success. Usually Pit would have responded to me by now. If it makes you folks feel any better, McCloud's gone off the radar, Falco mused, his feet kicked up on the sofa. The bird looked relaxed in comparison to the others. However, his cool persona betrayed his inward worry. I can't track him through the forest. I'm sure the signal's just bad. Both Palutena and Mutuo blinked disbelievingly at the Star Fox pilot. How would that make us feel better? Palutena asked. Falco shrugged. I don't know. I was looking for common ground. Bite me. Furthermore, Mutuo added, there is no such thing as reception with telepathy. The only limitation is dimensional gaps. As far as I know. Falco waved a dismissive hand at the psychic type. He was sure Fox was alright out there. Or so he hoped, anyway. Morgana wandered into the sitting area. A Sodakin about the same size as him was in his arms. Don't you guys worry one bit. I'm sure my buddy Joker and his persona Arson will get everyone out of there without so much as a scratch on them. Everyone present gave doubtful glances at each other. What could a teenager with a gun do to protect a cast of dimension-renowned heroes? Things certainly were doubtful in that regard. Oblivious to these looks, Morgana cracked open his can. I can't talk to Nis, Lucas said. He seemed to be on the verge of a nervous breakdown, but remained surprisingly calm at the same time. It's amazing what panic can do to the human body. Don't worry, kid, Falco said, moving to pat the blonde boy on the back. He'll be back before you can wink an eye. Lucas heard the words, and followed him. He winked one eye. Ness did not appear. You lied to me, Lucas murmured, tears starting to form. Yes, he knew that winking his eye wasn't going to bring his friend back. But at this point, he was too emotionally broken to care. He ran away. No. Falco shouted after him, before muttering something under his breath. Great going, Lombardi. You made him cry, Wolf sarcastically congratulated. He and Isabel were wrapped up in a very intense game of Go Fish. Wolf was losing. Probably because Isabel had brought an actual fishing rod. I hope they don't have to fight the giant monster. Isabel sighed. I don't know if the thing had any weaknesses. Monster? Palutena said apprehensively. What? What kind of monster? The kind with a ton of arms, a disgusting face, and a height that'd put most skyscrapers to shame, Wolf explained, going fish. That does not sound pleasant, Mutuo muttered. It wasn't. It was terrifying. Isabel exclaimed, shuddering in her seat. The pup had gotten a case of the heebie-jeebies from the terrifying creature. It could crush you like a bug. That's it, I'm going out, Palutena said, suddenly on her feet. I won't let them get slaughtered out there. Falco, spying this, hopped to his own feet. Whoa. Cool it, sister. I imagine the hands chose these specific people for this specific job for a specific reason. Specifically. Morgana piped up. I don't care, Palutena said. I am going. The bird's right, bird, Wolf said, casting his good eye towards the green-haired goddess. First, you don't know where they are. Second, what are you going to do to that behemoth? And third, this is a stupid idea. I'm a goddess. I'll find my way, she explained. Let me through. I can't lose pit like I've lost the others. Sounds like you're just bad at your job, goddess, Falco stung right back. Sit down. The hands'd be pissed if you left. Defeated, Palutena sunk back into her spot on the couch. She slouched heavily, her grief and anxiety flying through the roof. She held a hope in her heart that Pit was okay wherever he was. He was a smart tactician. Even without her gifts, Pit was gifted himself. He'd manage out there. She hoped. The door to the sitting room opened, and Mel Robin stuck his head in. He seemed disappointed, backing out quickly. Soon, female Karin did just the same thing, shaking her head as she turned to leave. This time, the fighters inside were curious enough to ask just what it was she was looking for. I've got a weird feeling in my gut, female Karin explained. Have any of you seen Richter? Everyone in the room exchanged glances with one another, before shaking their heads. No one in the room had seen Richter. Odd. Karin muttered, before going to continue her search. Richter was nowhere to be found in the hotel. The fall was a slippery slope. Literally. Plummeting for minutes, the fighters finally landed, rather harshly, on a slide made of rock. Deeper and deeper they descended into the underground temple, skidding along at speeds that should not be reached by the average person. Of course, some fared better than others. Sonic was able to curl into a ball and roll along, and Agent 3 made the wise decision to transform into her squid form. The others were not so lucky. Ow. Oh wow, whoa. Mario cried out, hopping down the slide while holding his backside. It felt as if he had been lit on fire. Alice wordlessly tumbled along in a ball, flailing helplessly to try and regain her balance. She was not faring very well. And Olimar had taken the worst of it. He had landed on his helmet. Under normal circumstances, this would be wonderful. The glass ball would have been doing just what it was meant to do. Unfortunately, that was not quite the case. As the captain rolled and tumbled and turned, a diagonal crack formed along the helmet, allowing the oxygen of the air to slowly seep in. A fear struck the poor man's heart. A fear amplified by the tumbling. If he didn't patch the hole, he was going to suffocate. He could not breathe oxygen. The screaming and rolling continued for a long moment, as each smasher did their best to keep their composure. Those who were wounded did not fare well on the slide. Intense agony shot throughout Cloud's arm, as it scraped against the rough sidings of the underground slide. Shulk groaned as a wound sealed shut opened itself once more. After what felt like ages, they finally touched down. Hard. Wario hit the ground hard, flattening into the consistency of paper. Using his mustache as two stubby legs, the no longer fat man was able to gracefully move himself out of the way. The rest of the fighters were soon to follow. A giant pig pile formed, as the slide led to a drop-off. One after another, the heroes landed down, dazed and confused. Sonic sputtered, wiping off his face. All right. Whoever's blood this is, you can have it back. I'd be glad to take it, Shulk said warily from somewhere under the mass of bodies. Do you ever shut up? Roo asked, pushing himself up to his feet. No, not really, Sonic answered with a shrug. The hedgehog wasn't wrong. He had blood trickling down his face from someone else. Marth managed to get away from the group for a moment, to inspect just where it was that they were. Obviously, they were pretty deep underground. He could tell that just by how the place was decorated. But the cuttings in the stone were immaculate. As if they hadn't been touched since the beginning of time. They were inscribed in a language he could not decipher. Gazing upward, the Hero King spied what seemed to be an inviting glass chandelier. But it was not glass. Upon closer inspection, Marth could see that the object was made out of a gem of some kind or another. Priceless, absolutely priceless. The ceiling was high. High enough as to where Marth could not see it, actually. It was eerie, looking up and seeing only a chandelier dangling by a chain with no ceiling to support it. Mystical. It was as if the whole place had no rhyme or reason. Marth had to blink and rub at his eyes to make himself sure that he was not seeing things. The place gave off an aura of mist. Something in the air gave the place a certain whimsy that was not there on the surface. But in this whimsy was an underlying danger that poisoned the air like a drop of food coloring. This was like no other temple he had ever explored before. As the heroes stumbled their way to their feet, Marth sensed in them the same kind of wonder that he had felt as he looked around. There were no more wisecracks from Sonic, or any more team-building exercises with Fox. All around, Marth saw men, women, and children, seeing that this is what they had come for. This is why they were here. It was an unsaid truth. "We should get moving," the Hero King finally said. His mouth had moved before his brain told it to speak. One by one, the remaining heroes nodded their heads, and away they wandered. Into the mist. Alimer's movements were getting sluggish. Too much oxygen in the body was not a good thing. Well, too much oxygen in his body, anyway. That stuff was absolutely deadly to a man from his planet. The low hissing sound being made as more oxygen entered his helmet was like a guillotine slowly being lowered closer and closer to that fragile neck of his. This was it. He was going to die. His vision was going loopy, and the colors were fading in and out of existence. His pigmen were going bananas trying to find a way to help their slowly deteriorating captain. They tried warning the other fighters, but no one seemed to understand what they were trying to say. They squeaked and squabbled, but no one paid them any mind. By the time they got Red Strizard to blow fire on the spot that needed fixing, it was too late. For a moment, the pigmen were convinced that Alimer was going to live. The newly sealed helmet seemed to keep the dastardly oxygen away from their precious leader. But he'd already inhaled too much of it. Simply put, Alimer could walk no more. Collapsing against a wall in the hallway of the Reset Temple, Alimer could feel his lungs shutting down. He was going to suffocate painfully right here. His pigmen gathered around him, like children at their father's deathbed. Captain Alimer, even in his time of death, was able to smile at them. Gently, he stroked each color by the stem. His labored breathing was getting harder and harder to maintain. In his dying breath, Alimer whistled, pointing to the other fighters. It was a command to carry on even without him. The pigmen stayed by his side until that heart of gold of his stopped pumping. Hopefully he found adventure in the next life. The valiant heroes continued off into the depths of the Reset Temple. Despite being pretty deep underground, the place seemed cold rather than warm. Ryu, especially, felt this cold. It felt as if he was walking on ice, and his bare feet felt like shriveling up against him and never coming out again. Damn him and his strong discipline. For a long while, the only sound among those gathered was of footsteps and breathing. No one wanted to address the carnage they had just witnessed, or their plans for the task at hand. After a minute or two of brisk walking, the hallway the heroes were walking through branched off into another large room. This room was even more extravagant than the last. The freezing temperature of the hallway seemed to be chased away and replaced with a more tolerable cool breeze. A natural light shone itself all around the room, despite there being no source from this light to come from. 5 sets of staircases moved in different directions, creating paths that branched here and there, and into the never-ending ceiling. "Now, I've seen a lot of mystic bullshittery in my time," Bayonetta spoke. Her voice echoed around the room. It was almost uncanny. But this has to be the most mystically bullshit place I've ever been. This got a few nervous laughs from the crowd. If anything, it was a way to relieve some of the stresses that they were feeling.
"You all should have never come here."
The voice came so suddenly, that it made everyone jump. That voice. There was an otherworldly quality to it. And yet, it retained some sort of familiarity with this world. Those gathered looked around frantically for the culprit. Even the swarm seemed to glance about, as if unsure what other godly creature might call this realm its home. "You took my brother," Nana shouted angrily at the voice. "Come out here so I can make you pay." "Yeah. That's the spirit, kid," Sonic cheered. "Show yourself, you time bastard." Mr. Game & Watch angrily booped and beeped. In his language, those were probably the worst swears one could imagine. "Who are you? And where are you hiding?" Shulk shouted, readying the Monado. He was prepared for a surprise attack.
"I am the Lord of the Reset Temple, and I have to warn you. If you continue on in your journey, you'll surely meet the others in death. Proceed with caution."
With that, the mysterious voice faded away. At this point, everyone was too invested to back out. The Lord of the Reset Temple best watch out. The party was at a loss. What were they supposed to do in a time like this? "I say our best chance is to stick together," Marth said. He had seen many a brave warrior fall on the battlefield because they strayed too far from the safety of their company. There had been too much death already today. Sticking together and carefully crawling through this taxing dungeon was, in his humble and practical opinion, the best option. Sonic, however, loudly opposed this idea. "We want to get this done before the next year, right?" the blue hedgehog said. "We're in the Reset Temple. There are 5 staircases that lead to different places. That would take forever if we guess wrong. My guess is that there's one big reset room in one of those 5 directions. If we split up, one of us will have to find it. Then, we reset back to neutral." "We're getting nowhere," Mario interjected, waving a hand in front of the 2 dueling members. "We need a consensus. A vote. I think Sonic's got the right idea." "Maybe we should consult with our seeing eye dog," Snake suggested. Everyone's eyes turned toward Stuck and Hunt. The dog sat idly by. No. I meant the future seer," Snake said, poking a thumb toward Shulk. The Monado wielder stood awkwardly by. About that." "What do you mean?" Rue asked. "What about what?"
No! I can't see it clearly!
Shulk muttered. Alice was the first to move. She joined Team Marth. Too much blood had been shed today. Others followed her example. Pit, Nana, and Agent 3, among others, sided with Marth. It was too risky to split up. There was safety and power in numbers. The rest sided with Sonic. "So, it's settled then," Sonic mused, clapping his hands together. "We'll split up and split the bill. Whoever finds the reset room last is a rotten egg."
No problem!
"How do we pick who goes with who?" Cloud asked, with a tilt of the head. It was almost feline-like. Mario offered a shrug. I don't know. Playground rules? Pick the one you want on your team? "This isn't a game, Mario, and we can't treat it like one," Snake grumpily said, with his arms crossed, "but I want Agent 3 and Duck Hunt." Why did Marth have to have last pick? Team Marth was pretty solid overall. With 25 of the heroes remaining alive, each team was fortunate enough to have 5 party members. Marth had taken down bigger threats with less qualified teammates. The Hero King was fortunate enough to have snagged Bayonetta and Chad the Wii Fit trainer. Both were agile and smart on their feet, and Marth was certain they would make fine party members. Mr. Game & Watch was a wild card, sure, but the 2D man was sure to come in and save them at the last moment through some kind of fuckery. That was the logic Marth had put behind it, anyway. And then there was Wario. Being the last team to form, Team Marth was, unfortunately, the last one to draw out of the hat. Sure, the first 2 picks were solid, but after that, it gradually went downhill. All the smart fighters were gone almost right away. One by one, the roster whittled down more and more, until finally, Wario was the last one standing against the magnificently carved walls. Marth was left with no choice but to take the greedy plumber with him. As hard as he tried, Marth couldn't get Wario to stop talking. "Wario's a number 1. Why did he get picked last? It's like growing up with Mario all over again. It's a chain chomp crap." Marth sighed deeply, massaging at his temples. "Wario, please. I know you're upset, but we haven't even chosen what staircase to go up yet. We want staircase number 3. Team Pit was happily on their way. Eager to get on with it, Pit took his scrappy adventurers and headed for the Immaculate wood of the 3rd staircase. Even with all of their combined weight, the stairs did not creak in the slightest. Which was odd. Everything about this place screamed ancient. Yet, the stairs sounded as if they had only been installed yesterday. Oh well. Pit forced any kind of worry out of his head. He had an army of misfits to lead. "Are you sure he's still alive?" Mario asked, as they reached the top of the stairs. Red was still unconscious, riding on the back of his Charizard for mobility. Oddly, the one who was unable to function was picked second to last. Defensively, Charizard snapped its jaws at the plumber. Mario apologetically put his hands up to calm the beast. "I'm sorry. I'm sure he's okie dokie." Nana sluggishly followed after her group, dragging her oversized mallet on the ground behind her. It was as if a hole had been barred in her chest, and she could no longer breathe. Papa was her everything. The 2 of them were connected on a level that no one else in the entire hotel could even begin to comprehend. And now that he was gone, it was almost as if a part of her was gone, too. Suddenly, she was scooped up and off of her feet. There was a surprised shout, as her feet dangled over something. Green? She blinked a few times, before rubbing at her eyes. Was she dreaming? Or were the dangerous cave fumes getting to her? Yoshi turned his head back to the child on his back, with a smile on his face. This poor girl. She lost more than he could ever imagine. An affectionate, amphibian tongue came out and kissed her on the cheek. Nana didn't even flinch. And she sure as hell didn't smile. Yoshi's own smile began to fade, as he hurried to keep up with the others. Poor girl. Poor girl. Team Pit continued to walk down the hallway for a moment. Then, another. The quintet continued on their way, with a feeling of intrigue about them. Mystery was everywhere, and it didn't settle well in anyone's gut. Their discomfort was growing, and it wasn't just because of the anxiety. One thing was becoming abundantly clear to everyone involved. Is it getting hotter in here? The angel suddenly asked. He was sweating pretty heavily. Oh yeah, Mario groaned, fanning himself with his glove. He, too, was profusely sweating. Charizard seemed absolutely unfazed, as did Squirtle. Ivysaur, however, had seen its better days. The grass type was heating up. One could feel the panic in the little green critter. Nana's head came down. She was the one here who was suffering the worst. A common trend, really. She gasped, nodding to Pit. Why yeah. I thought so. Pit muttered, fanning himself as well. I just hope there's no F yet. Pit felt the ground give out from underneath him. If it wasn't for Mario's hand at the backside of his tunic, he would have been finished. How did this room open up so quickly? There was no big opening in the walls a moment ago. Pit clambered back up to where the rest of the team was. His eyes were wide with fear, as he stared down. There was lava. And lots of it. I'm glad you picked the damn dog before you picked me, Snake. Cloud's gruff voice was against Snake, sir, as Team Snake went on their own way. Snake rolled his eyes at the other. These five had chosen lucky staircase number 1, and felt pretty confident behind their choice. Who would be stupid enough to put the super important reset room behind door number 1? It was so ridiculous that it had to work. What can I say? He's a man's best friend, Snake explained. Besides, we've got one of those little ink kids or whatever it is that they're called, and the best damn one of them, too. Isn't that right, Lemon? Agent 3 didn't respond. Her translator, which was located in her headphones, had been damaged by the weird aura that Guardian had been giving off. She was completely alone. The yellow inkling held tightly to the splatter shot in her hands, not knowing when or what was going to spring itself upon them. Right, Riz spoke, crossing his arms. A child with a water gun. Very helpful. You've gotten your ass handed to you by her too many times to come out and say that, Rue, and you know it, Cloud remarked. Hunted his little laugh at that one. Suddenly, Snake put up a hand to silence the rest of his party. There was a low scraping sound. To the untrained ear, it would sound like a mouse trying to sneak its way along a dizzy blanket. It sounded like trouble, and it sounded like it was coming from the next room. Snake pulled out his pistol, that he had strapped to his leg. Sure, the hands told him he couldn't use it, which is bullshit, because Joker and Bayonetta get to use them, but he was out of their jurisdiction. This was Snake time. Cloud held his Buster Sword tightly. Readied his fists. Duck and Hunt prepared their explosive cans and clay pigeons. Finally, Agent 3 began priming bombs. On my count, Snake mouthed to the rest of the group. Everyone nodded, except Agent 3. 3, 2, 1, now. Team Star Fox 2 was ready to go as soon as the teams were picked. With the indestructible ball of destruction on their side, Fox was confident he and his small army could take on any challenge that was thrown their way. He may be a little out of his element, our wings were always more his thing, but Fox was nimble on his feet, and a quick thinker, too. The members of Team Star Fox 2 also had these traits. Alice was an excellent fighter. She had proven this during the Mivolution. She'd saved the skin of many a fighter that fateful day, but couldn't save the skin of her fellow goodness. She sought to right this wrong. Link was a courageous battler, who had toppled many foes in his adventures across Hyrule. Deep in his heart, the hero knew this was what was right. In his mind's eye, he saw nothing short of victory. Vil was an outlier, to say the least. The poor kid didn't even look like he wanted to be here. Standing next to the confident and cool Link, Vil looked like an absolute nervous wreck. People were dying out there. He would give anything to be back home with his garden, catching fish, drinking Brewster's coffee. Kirby was. Well, Kirby. What more needed to be said? The pink puff didn't even seem to know what was going on. Fox, being the leader of the group, tried to lessen the tension they all felt by making small talk. So, do you guys think this is the right way? It seems pretty quiet. No one responded. Alice looked towards the fox, but said nothing. Link remained stoically quiet as always. Vil's eyes were full of terror, as he heard the noise of Fox's voice. Kirby hopped happily along, not acknowledging Fox at all. Fox sighed. Great. A quiet group. Maybe now that inner terror could eat him alive. Great. Awesome. Good talk. Speak of the devil. Fox took another step, and his boot began to sink into the stone of the floor. A shot rang out, as an arrow crashed into a wall nearby. Fox let out a startled noise, as did Vil. The rest remained quiet. Even better, Fox groaned after he had composed himself. Booby traps in the dark. Sonic was one lucky hedgehog. He was the first to come up with the whole splitting up idea, so he was privileged enough to get first pick. Of course, he picked only the toppest of the top around here. Don't worry, guys, Sonic assured his group. Once we get out of this mess, I'm going to get each and every one of you the best dogs you've ever had. HNNGH, don't remind me of food right now, little Mac groaned. Hunger was only now starting to set into the heroes gathered. I've got some more on berries if you want them, Leaf offered hopefully. Her voice was cheerful. However, that cheer bled with fakeness. Even her Pokemon knew it. Good, thanks. Not the biggest fan of Pokemon food, Max said, massaging the backside of his neck. Believe me. Sriracha has made me try some. He did, Shulk said, with a nod. I was there. I watched it. Let me tell you, that was some funny stuff. Leaf let out a small giggle, shaking her head slightly. What had gotten into her? Hysterics, no doubt. The swarm floated harmlessly behind everyone, as if creating a blanket in which to cover everyone with. To snuggle or to snuff the life out of everyone was up to anyone. Let me guess, Sonic nonchalantly spoke, a pinky finger headed to his ear. There's gonna be some kind of life-threatening thing right up ahead, isn't there? I don't know, Shulk said. Who are you talking to anyway? Sonic shrugged, continuing onward. However, there appeared to be nothing at all to threaten their lives. The group continued off down the hallway. The completely empty hallway with nothing at all that could potentially harm them. The hallway was completely empty, and yet, everyone was on high alert. At any second, the empty hallway could spring something on them. It never would. Instead, the uneasiness began to eat away at Team Sonic's mental health. The Lord of the Reset Temple watched from afar, as the groups went off in their own separate directions. A foolish choice. However, coming to the Reset Temple at all was a terrible decision. The Lord walked back and forth, his hands softly dragging across each and every string that could be reset. Every event that happened in this universe was here. With a simple flick of his wrist, the Lord could send this dimension back to the figurative Stone Age. He held back. He had sworn an oath to protect this place, even if it involved giving up his own life. A hand ran along his sword. It was long and sharp. There was a certain alienness to it, though, due to lack of use. It had been a while since he'd had visitors. Let alone 25 of them. Let the fun begin. So there I was, surrounded by 8 most expensive of decor. Amatalk and golden couches. Golden toilets. Too bad that a no-good Mario was a bad host. Bah. Couldn't let a Wario have his castle. And they say him the greedy one. Marth was about ready to rip his hair out. This chatterbox of a man just went on and on and on about the stupidest of things. One moment he would be babbling on about how he could get rich quickly off of selling directions to this temple, then he was rambling about his bike, and then he'd go on about how he was the best thing on this planet. Bayonetta was completely and utterly zoning him out, continuing her strides down the hallway without so much as a word. Great. Marth couldn't even rely on her snappy commentary to drown out Wario. Occasionally, Chad would make a comment on how Wario should probably work out more or focus on his stretching, but for the most part remain just as silent as Bayonetta. Silent. Reflecting. Thinking. Why was everyone except Wario so alone in their thoughts? Mr. Game & Watch beeped along with the group, not making any coherent sense. Marth had expected this. The 2D cardboard cutout of a man didn't speak any common language to him. Softly in Japanese, Marth cussed, as his headache grew more and more painful by the second. Suddenly, Mr. Game & Watch's beeping became more frantic. There was something in those sounds that conveyed an emotion. An emotion of fear. Terror. It was so profound that the group stopped walking. What's he so uppity about? Bayonetta asked, her brows furrowing in confusion. She'd never said more than a word or two to the little guy. Bah. Who cares? Wario grunted, scratching at his backside. He's probably jealous of Amy. War what? Something had picked Wario up by the backside of his biker jacket, and was hoisting him up into midair. Wario struggled frantically, kicking and wailing. You best let me go, you miserable. For the first time in a long time, Wario was silenced. Whatever had grabbed him had startled him nearly to death. A large, hairy appendage held him tightly. Right, Red eyes shone through the darkness, as the large arachnid glared down on the shifty group of survivors. Pathetic. These 5 would hardly satisfy her hunger or her bloodlust. Heads up darlings, we have some 8-legged friends that wants to play, Bayonetta announced in her usual snarky voice. However, there was a tint of unawareness in her voice, as if she wasn't confident this time. Spiders? There are multiple? Chad exclaimed. The Wii Fit trainer absolutely loathed spiders. If they were as large as a penny, he made Chelsea deal with them. And these suckers were way bigger than a penny. 3 sets of glowing red eyes stared down upon the heroes. Wario, regaining his sense, decided now was not a good time to sit idly by. He quite enjoyed living, after all. With one clench, he exploded a loud, powerful waft right into the face of the many-eyed freaks. Startled, the largest let Wario drop to the floor. He hit hard, but bounded quickly up to his feet once more. Mockingly, Wario picked his nose and drooped his eyelid at them. Wahahaha. You have a nothing on th great Wario. Shut up already. Marth shouted. They aren't done yet. That they were not. Springing from the walls, the enormous spiders descended upon Team Marth. Marth and Chad hardly parried out of the way before their large, rotund bodies hit the floor in front of them. Are you sent from the same bastards that killed the others? Bayonetta asked insulting, as the attack began. The monsters uttered an inhuman screech in return, momentarily shaking the group except for the Umbran Witch. Snarky as ever, Bayonetta responded as she dodged an incoming leg swipe. Ah, I see. Well, send him my regards from hell, then. Summoning the foot of a giant demon, Bayonetta smashed down on the head of the first critter. Splat. Blood and venom flew everywhere, as the spider was reduced to a corpse. However, that was not the last of the troubles the first spider would inflict. Smaller spiders dispersed from the head of the first, joining in on the assault. They swarmed around Chad. Ah. Get them all. Get them all. Chad exclaimed, slapping and kicking himself over and over. The teeth and fur of the critters felt like a million tiny knives being pushed into Chad's skin. Deeper and deeper the pain shot through him, and his screams of agony echoed off the walls of the temple. Before Wario could blow another cloud of insect replant from his backside, Chad was no longer breathing. And his corpse could have been better looking, to say the least. Marth angrily turned to the spiders before him. Another pointless death. And Chad was well liked by the rest of the group. At least now he could join his wife in death. The little spiders were gone, but the 2 big ones still remained. They needed a new plan. A better plan. Crushing them only made the problem worse. Mr. Game & Watch's distressed boopings reached Marth's ears again. Before he could react, he was smacked against the wall, head first, mind you, by the body of Mr. Game & Watch. One of the giant spiders held him tightly around the ankle. The poor 2D man was trying to ward off the spider by hitting it with a torch. The spider remained unmoved. And swallowed Game & Watch. It painfully chewed the little man and swallowed him down, before returning to the group. Wow, Wario said, aghast. That's a one bad mother. Shut up. Bayonetta and the newly concussed Marth shouted in unison. What? Marth staggered to his feet, holding his blade at his side. The 2 spiders still made a formidable foe. But Marth knew what had to happen. With one gone, there was an exit. A small chance, but a chance. You too, Marth snapped, getting Bayonetta's and Wario's attentions. Go, run down the middle on my command. I'll stay back and make a distraction. You can't. Bayonetta interjected. It's suicide. What's a suicide if you can bring me back? This could be our only chance, Marth remarked in retaliation. He walked closer to the growling spiders, holding his blade out before him. On my mark. Go. Wario and Bayonetta sprinted in between the giant legs of the 2 spiders, fleeing faster than they had ever fled before. This attracted the eyes of the spiders, who lashed out after the 2 of them. Marth didn't let them focus long. The Hero King jumped at the larger of the 2, slicing a diagonal slit through its eyes. A wail of anguish was heard, as its attention returned to the one remaining hero. Fight me. Marth cried out. And fight they did. Marth parried left, and then right. He got in blows where he could. He was doing pretty well. Until he took a blow from the leg. He flew backward, hardly retaining his balance as he landed back on the ground. He was about ready to attack again. When he suddenly felt a burning pain. He was wet. Dripping. The spiders had lobbed something at him, and he felt as if he was going to melt. The shot of venom was a direct shot, and began working its magic immediately. Marth cried out in anguish as the strong acid ate away at his flesh. He dropped his sword, the venom coursing through his veins. Seeing was downright impossible. His bones felt like they were melting. With another shout of pain, the hero hit his knees. This simple motion was too much, and it took every once in him not to vomit right here and now. He held his gut, as his skin contorted. One thought was abundantly clear to him as he sputtered on the ground. This is it. I'm dying. And, falling face forward on the ground, he did.
Forgive me, friends.
Oh gods. Oh gods, oh gods, oh gods. Did it have to be fire? Pit stared ahead of him at the lava pits that ebbed and flowed. His back hurt just looking at the luminescent molten rock. His stomach churned and burned just as the lava did right before him. And those platforms. They were so dangerous. So haphazard. There wasn't a railing in sight. How in the heavens was he supposed to get across a gap like this? The snow made him almost melt. But not as much as the lava would. It's a no big deal, Pit. Mario assured his friend. He'd been here before, that was for sure. Standing on the ledge, and looking out at a pool of lava with precarious jumps. Ah, it was almost like being back home. Or, well, in Bowser's castle, anyway. Here. I'll show you. Putting his best foot forward, Mario took a leap of faith. Pit could have sworn that time slowed down as Mario jumped. It seemed so far away. There was no way Pit could ever dream of doing that. Mario steadied himself, as he nearly fell off and into the pits below him. The heat of it hit him like a truck on Toad's Turnpike. Mamma mia, it was like an oven here. See? It's easy. Yoshi. Yoshi exclaimed. He followed after his plumber buddy with Nana still on his back. The Eskimo child screamed as Yoshi followed the same jump as Mario did. The lava boiled and bubbled beneath her, but she and Yoshi landed safely on the platform. However, Yoshi's clumsy jump made Mario plummet down into the lava below. Mario screamed in fear, as did Pit and the Pokemon. Mario. No. Pit shouted in anguish. Hot tears stung the angel's eyes, and were immediately evaporated by the heat. Mario dunked deep into the lava, before shooting up and screaming in pain. Holding his backside, Mario landed safely on the next platform. Everyone, except Yoshi, looked on, dumbfounded. Mamma mia, that hurt. Mario groaned. He gave Yoshi a look, to which Yoshi gave a goofy shrug. Bah, be more careful. Alright. It's easy. Pit said softly to himself. He stared down at the lava below. That stuff could melt his skin and sear his wing. But he could do it, he believed in himself. Taking a few steps backward, Pit prepared for takeoff. Something was wrong. Dark Pit smelled smoke. The Dark Angel had been smelling it for a while now, but right now it was something intense. It was overwhelming. Intense. As if someone had stuck his face into a bonfire. The smoke encircled him, and made his vision fuzzy. It must have been obvious, as Palutena came into the room. Pitu? Pitu, are you okay? The goddess asked. Pitu was sitting on the couch of the rec room, staring blankly ahead. His expression was dull and his face was pale as the moon. You look sick. IIW was really hot. Pitu answered. Suddenly, there was a sinking feeling in his gut. Pit. And now. I'm really. Cold. They lost him. It was gone. He'd sunk. His screams of anguish echoed inside of Mario's head. He was just a kid. It was too young for any of this. Probably. Mario had seen him as more of a son than anyone else on the roster. He was older, yes, but he acted so young. Their stint together in subspace made him respect and love the guy, and now that he was gone, Mario's heart hurt. Yoshi was the next to go. Going over a particularly precarious jump, Yoshi saw that he wasn't going to make it. There was a look of determination in the green Dino's eye as he flicked Nana off of his back and into the safe arms of Mario on the other side. He went down, and met a similar fate to Pit. Only 2 of the Pokemon survived the pits. Flying ever so gracefully through the air, Charizard, with Red on his back and the other 2 in his arms, had met the others. However, Ivysaur could not stand the heat, and died in Charizard's arms. Tears formed in Squirtle's eyes, as he tried to shake the grass type awake, to no avail. Peacefully, they laid him against the wall of the hallway, placing Red's Pokeball against him. With heavy hearts, the remaining heroes continued on their way. Red's arm made a twitch.
Red is dead, and it's all your fault.
A voice whispered in Leaf's ear. She bit her lip, and bit it hard to stop herself from crying. She knew deep down within her that this was true, but she refused to believe it. Red wasn't dead. None of this was real. None of this was happening. The hallway stretched on and on and on for what felt like an eternity. Nothing bad had popped out of the closet to attack them. Which was the worst part. "We've gotta be getting close," Little Mac said, to break the silence. They'd been walking for what felt like hours. Sonic murmured, accidentally dismissive. The silence fell over them once again. Except for that whisper.
None of this will fix what you did with. Your best friend's death is your fault. Even if the reset works, you couldn't save them.
"Shut up," Leaf suddenly shouted, stamping a foot on the ground. It echoed ominously throughout the hallway, and gathered the attention of her team. "Shut up. Shut up. Shut up." "Whoa, girl, take it easy," Sonic exclaimed, putting his hands up. "I didn't know I was that annoying." Leaf sent out her Ivisor, with a deranged look in her eye. "Whoever keeps saying that is going to take a solar beam right to the face."
But wait!
Shell cast, terrified. What was she thinking? Even Ivisor didn't look in on this plan, giving his trainer a worried expression. "We haven't said anything, Leaf," Little Mac explained, his hands raised. Is this about Red?" "About what?" "Shut up," Leaf screamed, the tears rolling now. She was unable to keep them back any longer. "Ivisor. Poison powder." Ivisor hesitated to attack them. These were his friends. But he couldn't go against his trainer, could he? "Take it easy," Sonic shouted. But it was too late. A poison gas surrounded the area. Gagging, the blue hedgehog covered his mouth. Little Mac and Shulk did the same. Suddenly, they all became heavier.
I'm... sorry.
Sleepy. The other members of the group fell asleep on the ground. "I said poison powder, not sleep powder," Leaf exclaimed. In grief of what she had become, she collapsed against the wall once more, arms covering her eyes as she sobbed. Ivisor was there to comfort her. But it wasn't what she wanted. She wanted Trizzard. She wanted Red to be okay. She wanted to get out of here. The swarm continued on down the way, as the rest of the group stopped here. Unaffected by the powder in the air, the swarm was free to continue as if nothing had happened. It didn't need a team, anyway.
Good girl.
The voice whispered again. The Lord of the Reset Temple defeated another team. The Pikmin wandered behind Kirby. Moved and determined by Captain Illimer's last request, the Pikmin had followed behind the one being on this planet that they knew could do no harm. The pink puffball was happily walking along the booby-trapped hallway, not fazed at all by the events that were transpiring. The Pikmin toddled along. Vil was not prepared for this. The traps were elusive to his eye and seemed to hurt like no other if one was caught up within them. Not that he'd know, personally, but given the amount of skulls and bones that were along this place, it wasn't pretty. The child inched along the way softly, not wanting to step too hard anywhere. He could set off a life-ending trap at any given moment. With his hands against the wall, the young, terrified mare crept behind the rest of Team Star Fox 2. Suddenly, one of the arms that was inching itself down the walls was clamped shut and into place. A new shot of terror exploded out of him, as he fought desperately to escape from the clamp. He made distressed sounds, as he struggled. "Go!" Fox exclaimed. For a moment, the leader had forgotten he was in a little minefield of traps. It would be a move that was his last. Taking one step towards the child to save him ended the life of Fox McCloud. Pressing his foot down, a system of arrows flung out of the wall and impaled the animal all over. Feeling the pain of the arrows sticking into him, Fox shouted out, only to trigger more traps, each one worse than the last. The pilot fell, letting death finally barrel roll him down one last time. They'll continue to struggle, but there was nothing anyone could do without risking their own lives. Alice and Link looked on in horror as an axe came from the wall directly above where the young one was stuck. Panicked tears prickled along his cheeks, as the mayor realized his death would soon be upon him. Maybe Isabelle was right, came a sudden, clear thought. Link and Alice had to look away, as Bill met his graphic end. Both felt like throwing up. The two continued after Kirby and the Pikmin. How did they make it look so easy? Link held tightly to his Hylian shield, and made sure his footing was correct. A clamp sprang out of the ground. Alice's leg was snared. She let out an exclamation. She, too, knew that her end was near. Panic settled over her, too, just as had happened with Gil. Clangs and crunches were heard above their heads. Link looked up, to see a giant boulder rapidly coming their way. Link and Alice made eye contact one last time. Alice smiled sweetly. "Save Kate," she spoke. Link nodded, a feeling of grief hitting his chest as heavy as the boulder. Within another instant, Alice was flattened. Link continued, and was racked with guilt. He made it to the end of the trapped hallway, and had to sit down for a moment. Sadness flew over him. Could have he saved her? Or any of them? He sighed deeply, more sadness hitting him. Suddenly, there was something delicious in front of his face. Opening his eyes, the hero of the wild spied a chain of Pikmin and Kirby holding up goods for him to eat. His eyes went to the little guys, and then to the food. Sadly, he accepted the offerings. He gave each one of them a stroke on the stems. Team Snake was getting its collective ass whooped. When they had heard the sounds coming from the next room, they had anticipated a battle. An epic battle, even. But what they did not expect from that quiet sound was a smaller version of the Guardian that tormented them outside. Flank left. Left. Snake shouted to his teammates. The purple gaze of the creature was focused squarely on Riku, who stood his ground as if paralyzed. A swiping hand came swinging for the Street Fighter. Snake dove to get his companion out of the way, taking a heavy hit along the thigh. He grunted in pain, but crawled to safety with the gooey warrior. "Move," I said. "Damn it." Snake cussed. Plucking a grenade from his belt, Snake tossed it into the air. With the marksmanship of a true professional, he shot it midair with the pistol he'd been packing. It exploded in the air, and gave them a second to recuperate as a team. "What did we learn from the last bastard?" Cloud shouted. "We can't kill this fucker. We need to get out." "We cannot," Rish said. The creature was rapidly coming at them. They needed to think quickly. "The exits are sealed off. We need to take this beast head on if we are to get out alive." Hunt nodded his doggy head rapidly. Duck quacked. Agent 3 stood, staring. "Go. Go. Go." Snake shouted. Plucking more nades from his belt, he threw them with all his might. These, at least, seemed to stun the monster. It screamed out in annoyance, charging once more. The team, collectively, shot to the right. The Guardian slammed against the wall, shaking the whole arena. Snapping out of her trance, Agent 3 super jumped at the vile creature, covering it in yellowing. The ink seemed to melt at the flesh of the giant. "Way to go, kid." Snake shouted, like a father at a baseball game. He was proud. No pride, however, could save her from what happened next. All 6 of the monster's arms grabbed for the female Lincoln. She dodged the first few, but was ultimately caught by one or another of them. With a pained shout, she tried changing into squid form to escape. This, too, proved fruitless, as the monster's grip was too strong. "No!" Rish shouted. The 3 men and their dog advanced on the monster. But it was too late. With a full force slap, he knocked them all back, and dunked Agent 3 into a vat of cold water. The squid screamed in agony, as the water melted her flesh. She struggled, but it was ultimately pointless. Like a salt crystal in liquid, Agent 3 disintegrated into the water. "You fucker!" yelled Snake. Anger spiked through him, as an ultimatum came to him. He looked down to his vest, and then back to the monster. He took it off. "What are you doing, Snake?" Cloud asked, astounded. "Give me your cans," Snake told Hunt. The dog did just that. Snake strapped them, and all the other explosives he had on him onto the vest. There was a glint in his eye, as his met the purple of the creature. "Snake," Liz said, but it didn't matter. Snake didn't hear it. With one hard toss, the jacket full of bombs went sailing through the air. With the skill of a dead eye, Snake shot the vest as it hit the monster in the face. Snake shielded his eyes, as the explosion went off, and then shielded his head as Monster Biff soared through the sky. Rin and Cloud did the same. "You're pretty handy with that gun," Cloud commentated. "Yeah," Snake said gruffly, reloading it. He was down to his last ammo reserve. "I'd better be. This Lord of the Reset Temple's got a storm coming." All the roads converged before one singular door. 12 were their numbers. Each of them had lost so much today. As the final heroes came to be with one another, they mourned the losses they had today. Suddenly, the giant door before the 12 of them creaked open. Dramatically, a light shone around the silhouette. The silhouette of a man in a mask with a large cape draping over him. He leaned against a sword that was obviously not created by him, but for him by the creators of the world for this specific reason.
You shouldn't have come here.
The Lord of the Reset Temple spoke to them. "You don't know the consequences." "Oh, we know," Bayonetta spat back. "And we're about to nullify them." brilliant bright light struck the heroes standing like a beam of magnified sunlight on a colony of ants. In the dimness of the hallways, seeing such a contrast was downright hurtful. The light pulled around them, and, for the briefest of moments, each thought that this was where they met a similar fate to the friends they had lost before them. This feeling of being consumed by light was a familiar feeling. But mere moments later, eyes adjusted, and each fighter could see what stood before them and the treasure they had so desired. The Lord of the Reset Temple stood high and mighty up the final staircase. This one was made of solid white marble. It was sleek, and appeared sleeker now that it was drenched in the milky whiteness that was the all-consuming light. In true final boss fashion, the Reset Lord was decked out in the most brilliant armor imaginable, and the large sword he carried looked like it could seriously harm someone. A mask, similar to that of the Guardian's own face, covered the head and face of the entity before them. The entity slowly paced at the tops of the stairs.
Fancy meeting you all here.
It spoke. The purple glare pierced the fighters down below, who were readying for the final battle.
I've been watching you for all of some time, and I have to say, I'm pretty fond of a few of you. If it wasn't in my contract to keep this place safe, I might have considered letting you through.
Now is no time for jokes. You've taken so much from us already, Riss spat angrily. The street fighter had not known just how close he had grown to some of the members here until he had lost them.
It's not a joke.
The Lord retorted, turning to face them. The velvet cape he wore hung loosely in the air.
All of you are exceptional. That's not a question at all. There is a reason the hands picked you people instead of those chumps back at the hotel. I don't know why you have come here, and why you didn't run in the face of the Guardian. Even after it killed all so many of your friends, you still pushed on. And then, the temple. This temple. My temple. You kept on. In the face of death. It is extraordinary.
That voice. Mario had heard that voice somewhere before. In the hazy backlot of his mind, Mario knew that that was the voice of someone he had met in his life. Perhaps it was a stowaway from his realm. The plumber blinked, before shaking his head. Cracking his knuckles, he got ready to pummel. Yeah, we get it, Snake said, his gun pointed directly at that disgusting helmet of its. You're a big fan. Listen, punk. I don't have time to sit here and reason with you. I've lost a lot in my life, and I refuse to lose any more today. You're either going to kindly step aside for us, or we are going to make you step aside. The Lord leaned on his sword, gesturing openly with his free hand.
I can't! What don't you bring that troglodytes don't understand about this? You have no idea the ramifications of your actions will be. You will throw off the space condemn your all our jazz. Let me tell you guys, I've seen every possible timeline this fucking universe can have, and none of them are as pretty as this one. It's perfect as it is. I can't let you fuck it all up!
Perfect? This is your idea of perfect? Nana shouted, a hot anger starting to boil up in her stomach. I had to watch my brother die in my arms. My friends fell in lava and had their skin melted off. Red's probably brain dead, or worse. Charizard was taken aback by Nana's words, as was the Lord of the Reset Temple.
You think I did that? No, you did that yourselves.
The Reset Temple Lord shouted.
The hands got greedy and grief-stricken. You are nothing more than pawns. Can't you see where I'm coming from?
No, Cloud answered. Everyone else agreed with him.
You are literally fighting and dying to save that stupid core they got killed.
It told them. That's simply untrue, Bayonetta stated. At first? Yes. It was. But now, it's for so much more than that. If there was one thing for certain, this battle wasn't just for Core. It was for everyone. All that have fallen. All that have lost. All that deserved so much better. It was time for the main event to commence.
Pathetic. Close-minded.
The Lord spat. He readied his sword.
If it's the fight to the death you want, then it's one you'll get.
Ready yourselves. The end comes.
The Lord of the Temple proved to be quite the impressive fighter. It was a part of the job title, after all. One after another, the fighters came to face him. One after another, the Lord beat them back. He seemed to be holding back, not going in to finish off anyone. Rick came forward with a powerful kick. However, the Lord caught his foot, and slung him clear across the room. Mario went to capitalize on the situation by throwing Cappy at the foe. With one fell swoop of the godly sword, Cappy was reflected upon Bayonetta's head. Mario was, subsequently, transported into the body of the Umbra Witch, before being forcefully ejected by the soul of Bayonetta. I saw that look in your eye, plumber boy, Bayonetta all but growled. Bug off. Mario apologetically stooped. His face was red. Spying this, the Lord sent out a powerful shockwave that went for the plumber. Mario narrowly avoided being pelted with it, as did Bayonetta. Kirby brought out his cutter to go after the foe at hand. The two clashed and clanged, before Kirby eventually ate a foot right to the mouth. Startled and suddenly hurting, the pink puff was forced backwards by the powerful kick. A bullet narrowly missed the Lord's head, as Snake took his shot at falling the beast before him. Suddenly averted to the user of the weapon, the Lord made a disappointed sound.
Didn't the heads tell you guards are off limits, Snake?
It asked.
They're dishonorable weapons.
Hey! Bayonetta yelled. Swishing his blade through the air, the Lord created a harsh wind that forced many fighters to topple to the ground. Red tumbled off of Charizard's back, and lay slumped against the wall. He had hit his head again. And this time Charizard let him lay. No sense fighting a being with an unconscious man on his back. Roaring loudly, Charizard charged at the Lord. Engulfing itself in flames, Charizard charged headlong into the Lord, and landed a solid hit. Stunned by this, the Reset Temple Lord stumbled backwards. Way to go, Charizard! Mario shouted. Link shot him a thumbs up. The hero was busy trying to fix his bow and arrow. The Lord's attack had sliced the string that allowed him to fire a volley of arrows at the Lord.
Don't celebrate.
The Lord advised them.
Just be the last moment you live in!
Assisted by the swarm, Nana flew through the air. There was a murderous glare in her eye, as she plummeted and attached herself to the Lord's neck. You killed my brother. Nana screamed in his ear. Forming an icicle in her gloved hand, Nana went to town on the Lord's armor. Again and again, the clanging of metal was heard, as the Lord fought desperately to get her off.
Boss child!
He shouted. He was acutely aware of the Smashers closing in on his location. They seemed to be taking the upper hand, which was not acceptable. Parrying out of the way, the Lord dodged a punch from Mario. Instead, the plumber hit a fistful of a small child, knocking Nana off of the Lord. She squawked, as she tumbled to the floor. Mario immediately realized his mistake, quickly bending down to help up the girl. A sudden pain shot through Mario's chest. Nana tumbled out of his arms and onto the floor once again. Pushing deeper, Mario's world began to fade, as the Lord's sword stuck out of his chest.
Perish!
Mario. No. Cappy exclaimed, popping off of Mario's head.
Game over, Mario!
The Lord quipped, tossing him aside like a rag doll, not minding the plumber's blood smeared on his blade.
A pity too. You and I could have been friends.
You bastard!
Cloud exclaimed. Fueled by raging passion, he dove into fight in his place. The Buster Sword slammed against the godlike sword. A beam of light seemed to escape the swords. Finding a vulnerable spot, Cloud managed to activate his Punisher mode and attack the Lord in fury of slashes, but the Lord managed to counter back despite Cloud's super soldier speed. Cloud grit his teeth, as he pushed harder against the other's sword. The Lord grunted.
Maybe he already has.
The Temple Lord huffed. Parrying to the left, he landed a hard kick in Cloud's gut. Cloud toppled over backwards, tripping over Hunt, who was trying to wake Mario up with his tongue. Cloud fell down, dazed and confused. The Lord put his on Cloud's head. His sword pressed against Cloud's chest.
One more wrong step, and this blonde twink dies.
Everyone looked at each other, not moving a muscle. Only Snake seemed relaxed in the moment, his hands comfortably resting over his chest. What are you so confident about? Can't you see we're losing? Bayonetta whisper shouted. I'm no loser, Bayonetta, Snake shrugged. Besides, I have a plan. Do you? Now? Bayonetta huffed, exhausted. And what's that? Watch and learn, Snake quipped. Suddenly, he quick drew his pistol from its holster. With a clean shot, Snake shot the hand that held the sword. With another, he knocked the sword away, which clambered against the cool floor of the temple. Flicking his pistol up to his lips, Snake blew the smoke away. Then, he pointed the gun at the now disarmed Temple Lord. Dishonorable, huh? Angrily, the Lord stomped on Cloud. He made a hurt noise, and then fell silent.
I don't even need a sword to eradicate you, David Hater!
The mention of his real name caught Snake off guard. In this moment, the Temple Lord made a move. He was surprisingly quick for his get-up. Dashing, he kicked Snake's hand upward, sending the gun soaring through the air. Then, he moved to punch Snake in the nose. Luckily, Snake was trained in hand-to-hand, and so was Riku. Snake caught the hand that went for him, and twisted. The Lord cried out in pain, before Riku came in to give him a proper whopping. 1, 2, 3 punches right to that stupid mask of his, then he landed a round kick to his head, and finally, ending it with his famous and all-power dragon's fist, Shoryuken. Each time, the Lord recoiled. Suddenly, there was a familiar face staring back at Snake. Nini had climbed up the armor in true ice climber fashion, and removed the mask that the entity was wearing. Angrily, she tossed it aside, ready to kill the weak spot with an icicle. Everyone stopped. It felt like time itself had stopped, as the clattering of the helmet was heard all around. Mark? Mark was of this world, yes, but he was not created by the hands. In fact, he was created long before the hands themselves would come to know this place as home. Mark was created by the original creator, with one specific task put in place. He was tasked with guarding the Reset Temple. A temple that held terrible strength within it, and was to be used only in doomsday scenarios. Never had anyone been foolish to try and use it, and eventually it faded into the obscurities of Legend of the Realm. Guarding the temple for eons and eons got rather boring. Eventually, Mark realized that the gods he had been employed by were not coming back. In a fit of confusion and sadness, Mark abandoned his post to go live a more normal life. Or, as normal of a life that one can have around these parts. Dashing out of the Reset Temple with little other than the clothes on his back, Mark left the defense to the Guardian. The big guy probably had it in the bag, anyway. With no idea where he was to go or for what reason he had to go on, Mark dashed out into the world. Footfall after footfall echoed through the seemingly never-ending forest. Feeling all of his strength depleting from his body, Mark passed out in a puddle of mud beside a flower field. He was more than ready to allow the earth to reclaim him. But fate worked in mysterious ways. A young woman from a nearby town had been walking the path when she saw the poor man at his lowest point. Hoisting him up and leading him to her cottage, she tried to learn what this man was about and why he was so eager to die. It was in this conversation that the Lord of the Reset Temple actually took on the alias of Mark. This woman would later become his wife, and they would live happily, bringing their own offspring into the world. However, Mark was unaffected by the passage of time, while his wife and children were not. They grew older and older by the day, while he remained the same. He knew eventually that they would perish, and he would be forced to continue living. It was in this time of doubt that the Master Trio came into Mark's life. Deals were struck, and contracts were signed. On one hand, his family, too, would be given the gift of limitless aging. On the other, he pledged himself to the Smash tournaments as the manager of the grounds. It was alright. He needed a job to do anyway. After the Mythocalypse, Mark had caught wind of the hands plotting one night. They were going to send the Smashers to the Reset Temple to undo this. An urge came over Mark after hearing this. An urge, long sealed away, to protect the temple. He didn't even tell his body to run back to his own home. The home he had known for centuries. It just did. The Guardian was delighted to see his return. And so was every other creature and critter that lived within the temple. Donning his old suit of armor, Mark prepared to fight the friends he had made to fulfill a contractual obligation. The one he had been created for. Mark took the moment of surprise as his moment to strike. The Lord hit Snake squarely in the gut with his knee. The impact was profound enough to knock the man to the ground. Then, Mark had Bucktree, who was knocked backward by the impact. Free from his attackers, Mark flung Nana off of his back. Mark. Why? Bayonetta asked, her guns hanging loosely by her side. You caused so much pain and suffering here. Why would you? Even the swarm seemed moved by this realization. Its assault on Mark had stopped, and the inky blackness floating idly next to Bayonetta. Mark looked to the pained face of Bayonetta, and then to the astounded faces of Kirby and the Duck Hunt dude of, I don't have a choice. You wouldn't understand. While all of this was going on, Link had snuck away from the group. The hero of the wild crept up the marble stairs and into the room that Mark had been guarding. The room was massive. Absolutely massive. It nearly caused a sensory overload in the mind of Link, as he stumbled about. It appeared as if every single event that had ever happened in this universe was tapestrated right here in this very room. Link had been to many temples in his time. He'd solved many puzzles. But this room was unlike any he had ever found in his entire life. A voice echoed inside his head. It was Alice's voice, moments before she met her inevitable death. Save Kate. Link's eyes darted around the room, looking for the correct wire or switch. He could hear voices below him, and they seemed to be coming closer. He knew that he had to act quickly, or not act at all and risk throwing out the entire mission. But where was he to start in a place like this? Ferociously, Link searched around, as the voices grew closer and closer. Footsteps were heard, rushing up towards the door. Link's eyes spied a particularly appealing button. He rushed towards it, feeling the pressure of the situation growing. The button read Chapter 103, Meatballing the Immaculate Part 1. The door swung open. Mark dragged himself up the steps wildly, with Snake and Rick close behind him. No. You don't know what you're? But it was too late. Link had already hit the button. Everything went white. The swirling whiteness soon began to fade, as the dimension's time-space began to settle once more in this familiar timeline. It was the middle of the night, and the machine was blasting on at full force. The hands felt this. A growing sense of pride and joy was welling up inside of their gloved bodies. The heroes had done it. They had reset the world. They were back to a time before Korra had died. And now they knew just what they had to do. The energy Matt had absorbed from Master Core was enough to wipe out his entire army once released. Killing him had done just that. If the hands could defeat Matt before he could assemble the army, they could shut down the machine and rescue the poor Miz that had been corrupted from his influence. That was exactly what they planned to do. Too long, we have been trapped underground. Parts floating around in a machine to be assembled into walking, feeling punching bags. Matt spoke onto his followers. Each orange-eyed Mig gazed upon him, clinging to his every word. I believe it's time for a revolution. One where we take control. For you. For me. For all of us. We need to. Suddenly, Matt had disappeared. With a simple snap of his fingers, Master Hand transported Matt to an alternate dimension. A dimension far, far away from there. Obama, Peepee, and Long seemed to be broken from their curse. Blinking, they looked around. Other Miz, however, still held an evil in their hearts. Karen had resurfaced. But with no Matt to guide her evil actions, she was about as evil as the average Villains Club member. A clanking was heard as the machine was forced to shut off, and one last member of the army escaped from the pits of the Creator. The machine sputtered to a stop, as the last Created stepped out. Umi with brown hair, pulled back into pigtails. The deed was done. Once more, the sun came to shine over the world of Smash, as it had all those days before. Back before the Mir revolution had taken place. Back before so many of them had died trying to bring back the lovable little Master Core. Some Smashers were fortunate. Vild, who had met with a fate most grim, awoke that day with only the memory of finding the Guardian. Happily, the young child sprung from his bed to go and prepare himself a delicious breakfast. For some odd reason, Vild could not remember what had happened after he met the Guardian's gaze. All he remembered was staring up in terror as the Guardian towered over him. After that, he drew a blank. He had no idea how he returned to the hotel, or what had become of him in that gaze. Oh well. Sometimes ignorance was bliss. As Vild prepared himself a bowl of everyone's favorite Marios, he felt someone come up behind him and wrap him in a warm hug. He enjoyed the contact. Was that fur that he felt? Upon closer inspection, or, rather, turning around, Vild soon found that it was Isabel hugging him. Happily, the mayor returned the gesture to his trusty secretary, smiling against her. Oh Magashimsa happy okay. Isabel rapidly rambled. Her worry from the past few days seemed to have transferred itself into this kind of joy. Vild laughed happily. Did you get hurt? In all honesty, Vild didn't believe he had been. Reassuringly, he shook his head at the dog. Isabel let out a happy sigh, and then turned it into jittery giggles. Good. I would have had that whole temple torn down myself if you had been. Vild continued to smile at her. His heart was happy when she was happy, and he wanted her to stay that way. Though, if he did have to complain, he could have mentioned the faint pain he felt in his neck. Others were not blessed with this ignorance. Leaf remembered every little gritty detail of the horrible adventure she had just been on. She remembered the sickening whack that had sounded as her Charizard was knocked out of the sky. She remembered the terrible Fred had made after her Charizard slammed into him. And, worst of all, she remembered the tears she had shed in the Reset Temple over how terrible she was, and the terrible acts she had almost committed in that place of desperation and grief. Suddenly, she was no longer on the cold floors of the Reset Temple, sobbing into her hands over the sleeping bodies of her teammates and being comforted by her two remaining Pokémon. She was engulfed in a white light, and, after what felt like an eternity, returned safe and sound to her bed at the hotel. Leaf awoke with a start. A cold sweat had broken out over the young girl's body, and her heart was racing a mile a minute. Her breathing was rushed and heavy, as she rapidly kicked out from under her covers. There was no way that was a dream. She knew it was real. Whoever had managed to make it through must have found the switch to reset back to a time before all these terrible things happened. Red. Go make sure Red is okay. The voice came to her as clearly as the sunshine from her window. Though, this voice did not belong to some kind of mystical lord. No, it was the thought of her own thinking. Hastily, she threw on her shoes and sprinted across the hallway to Red's room. With vigor, she knocked loudly and quickly. Red? Red, are you in there? Damn it, Red, open up. I'm coming, I'm coming. Arceus Leaf, do you know what time it is? Came a sleepy voice from behind the door. She must have awakened the other trainer. Groggily, Red opened the door to the hallway. He was tired looking and a bit disheveled given his startling wake-up. But he was alive. The reset had worked. What? He asked. You look like you just saw a shiny legendary. Leaf touched his face to make sure this was real. Thank Arceus. Thank God. Thank fucking Palutena for all she cared. Leaf collapsed into Red's arms, crying tears of joy. Others, still, had been reset further than others. The power of the reset temple had an effect on everyone within. But this power seemed to be somewhat random. Pit sat in the rec room, happily going about his business. It was so great to be back at the hotel again after all this time. With a spring in his step, Pit went to check the old arcade cabinet. Awesome. AAA was still at the very top. The angel grinned to himself. Suddenly, he felt a presence. His eyes moved away from the screen of the game and met the striking blue eyes of Mario. Hey Mario. Pit waved happily. Oh man, he had so many good memories with this guy. Long time no see, huh? You're alive, Mario said, a small smile growing over his face. He'd seen this kid fall into lava and melt. Seeing him alive and well enough to come and play was an amazing feeling. Okay. That was weird. Pit scrunched his brows. Of course I'm alive. Why wouldn't I? Did Pichu bet you that I die in my sleep, or something? No. Mario responded, a bit of confusion coming over him as well. I hope that was a joke. I'm just happy to see you alive. Why wouldn't I be alive? Pit asked, cocking his head to the side. There was some kind of misunderstanding here. I just got here, Mario. WH. What? Mario asked. Mr. Pit? If you don't mind, Cappy said from atop Mario's head. Pit almost fell over backwards, startled. What kind of demon is that? Pit shouted. Mario, your hat. It's haunted. Mario and Cappy exchanged a worried look. Pit? Mario asked, how long do you think we've been here? Pit has hardly managed to regain his composure. The angel wiped off his tunic. Like a week or two, I think. Why do you ask? Richter sat on the steps of the front door to the hotel, watching the world turn while zoning completely out. He was completely lost in thought, reflecting on what he had experienced the past couple of days. The sudden pain in his chest. The sudden blackness. The sudden numbness and nothingness he had experienced in that strange void. What the hell had happened? And, just like that, in all the time in the world and no time at all, he had returned back to his spot in his bed. He was having an existential crisis like no other. On your left, came the voice of a young woman. Ritter looked up, to see Lucina coming forward to sit next to him. She held the same look in her eye as he did, and even had the same sort of disheveled appearance. Ritter scooted out of the way to allow her to take a seat beside him. She did just that, resting her arms on her knees and staring out and down the way. Her eyes hung on the sunset, but she didn't see it. She saw a far-off place in her mind, as she, too, reflected on the void. One moment, she was having a conversation with Meta Knight about his mask and her own, and the next she was experiencing nothing at all. She wanted to cry out in agony or surprise, but found that she was unable to. There was nothing in this place. Nothing but darkness. Then, after some imperceivable amount of time had passed, she was returned to the spot where she had been. Her first thought was to go and consult her father about the strange and antagonizing phenomenon, only to realize he had experienced quite the same thing. By the looks of it, Richter had too. The two of them sat in silence, simply reflecting on what they had witnessed. Both sensed that the other had gone through quite the same thing, without speaking a word. Even though neither spoke a word, they felt a kind of closeness in this shared experience. The void had bored a hole into their souls. Kirby had seen a lot of violence in his 4 years of existence. Most of the time, none of it bothered him. For years he had fought off gods to protect his home world, and felt desensitized to the suffering and violence around him. He was doing his duty after all. Being the savior planet Popstar needed. However, Kirby did still feel. He felt a lot, actually, and this escapade in the reset temple made him feel overwhelmed with emotion. The pink puff walked past Snake in the lobby. The soldier had fallen asleep in one of the plush armchairs that decorated the room, with Duck and Hunt perched peacefully on his lap. The serene image was quite the juxtaposition to the immense amount of death and destruction they had both just witnessed. Did Snake remember what he had just been through? The man slept soundly in the chair. He appeared exhausted, but slept peacefully. Kirby couldn't tell. All he knew was that he could remember. The Star Warrior suddenly had a thought. Where was Mark? That man had caused this. Even if he was doing his duty as the protector of the temple, he had caused the suffering of so many. As Kirby looked about, however, the 30-something looking man was nowhere to be seen. Good. Kirby didn't want to see him anyway. His feet led him up a flight of stairs. Then, 2 more. Before he knew what he was doing, Kirby reached up, to the best of his ability, and knocked on the door before him. It took a moment or two, but finally, the door creaked open. Before Kirby stood King Dedede. "Hey, Kirby!" King Dedede exclaimed, excited to see his friend. "You must have made it, hero boy." It felt like this old dimension was gone crumbling on itself. "Don't think you can get out of here without a hug. You did great, and I knowed you would." King Dedede scooped Kirby up in a grateful hug. The warmth of the king was immediately noticed. Kirby hugged back and let loose a stream of tears, releasing all the pain and suffering he had witnessed. Papa received a rather rude awakening. Nana, waking up mere seconds after the reset had sent them to sleep in a different timeline, spied her brother asleep across the way. With a mixture of happiness, relief, excitement, and soft sadness, she attacked him, by jumping onto his bed. Papa, now awake, was thrown off of his bed and wrapped in a warm hug. It was warmer than his parka. Nana, in true Eskimo fashion, rubbed her face on his own. If they had noses, it would have been a flurry of Eskimo kisses. "What? Nana, what gives?" Papa exclaimed. "I was almost to the top of Icicle Mountain." "Shut up and let me love you, you massive jerk," Nana said, aggressive but with genuine happiness. "You died in my arms, this is the least you can let me do." Papa paused for a minute, trying to recall what happened. He did remember receiving a pretty bad cut in the battle with the Guardian, but he never remembered actually dying. "Did I?" "Yes. And I'm forever emotionally scarred because of it," Nana said, only half joking. Papa chuckled at that. "You're a dork." The duo were back together, and Nana couldn't imagine a better timeline. "Are you sure the reset actually happened?" "Yes, I'm sure. I've already transported Matt out of this world. No other time has he been here, and I sure as hell I'm not going to invite him back." "Where did Core get reset to?" "I don't know, you idiot. If I knew he'd be there already. He could be anywhere." Master Hand and Crazy Hand flew around the hotel at crazy speeds, looking for the reason the reset temple was even considered in the first place. If all the other smashers were brought back from death, Master Core should be, too, right? "Did you two try the master office?" the announcer asked. Both hands paused. "No," Crazy admitted. With their path made clear to them, both Master Hand and Crazy Hand sped back to the office. They nearly toppled Gendorf over, who shouted some obscene things behind their backs. Both practically punched down the door to the office. There, sitting on the counter where Master Hand tends to the paperwork, was a little glowing orb. It seemed to glow brighter when the two of them entered, as if happier by their presence. "Hey!" Master Core exclaimed, hopping up and down on the tabletop. "So, when are we getting this fighting tournament thing started with? Are the fighters here yet? How many are gonna be here this time?" The hand said nothing in response to the Core's questioning. Instead, the two of them picked Core up, and wrapped it in a hug. "Well, hey, what's this affection about?" Core asked. Still, the hands remained quiet. There was a feeling of gravitational pull, as the announcer joined in on the hug. Once again, the family was made whole, the deal's off, hands. Mark was downright livid. The hands had used the reset temple, and for what? To bring back an accident that Crazy had made all the way back when they had first created the hotel? Master Core seemed to be the least important member of the four. In fact, if Mark was remembering correctly, Core didn't even directly control anything in this realm without the supervision of one of the 3 others. "Do you know how many impurities you've caused in this dimension now? It was already unstable before because of all these Nimrods you keep pulling from alternate dimensions, but now that you've reset? The whole damn dimension's going crazy. You've ripped a hole right in the middle of the space-time continuum. There's branching timelines. It used to be perfect, and I thought I instructed you to never, under any circumstance, use the temple when I signed that contract. We were pressed for options, Mark, and utilizing the reset temple seemed to be the easiest solution, Master Hand calmly explained. Yeah, Mark. Have a heart. Crazy Hand exclaimed, a somewhat hurt tone in his voice. I'm sure the elders would have understood. Why would they build a temple like that if they never intended it to be used? They built it to avoid an apocalypse. Not to bring back your glowing basketball. Mark returned. Exasperated, Mark moved to sit in an armchair that was much too big for him. Say, if you don't mind me asking, what would have you done if all of your precious fighters were, I don't know, massacred in cold blood out there? We knew that would never happen, Master Hand shot back, not at all convincing. Mark let out a huff at that one. Right, yeah. Well, thanks to you idiots, there's a time stream out there where all of them were killed, and we might just happen to slip into it. Mark shouted. He massaged at his temples. I can't do this gig anymore. If this is how you treat me, completely betray my trust like that, you knuckleheads are going to have to find another groundskeeper. Come on, Mark. There's no need to be like that. Crazy Hand said. This was a one-time deal. This'll never happen again. From now on, we're keeping Core under lock and key. Master Core muttered, looking up at the two giant hands. Can someone fill me in on what's happening? Not now, Core. The adults are talking, the announcer responded, as quietly as he could. It was not at all quiet. That's what you told me when I first started working here, Mark said. This is a complete stab in the back, guys. I thought that was the job of your ancestors. Master Hand seemed hurt by this. The giant glove materialized a long piece of paper out of the air. It was the original contract. Now, Mark, I understand that you are upset. But you must remember our deal. Your family is only ageless because you work for US. If you terminate your contract. Mark filled in where Master Hand had drifted off. The hand meant well, he really did. Master Hand was fond of Mark and his work ethic around the Smash Hotel. However, a contract was a contract. Those who remember unmasking me in the temple will hate me, anyway, Mark said. I'm sure that one ice climber is going to maul me for what the Reset Guardian did to her brother. Oh boy, that was a bad call on the Guardian's part, Crazy Hand said, wagging a finger. If you're going to kill one of them, kill Nana. Pop'll be too big of a mess to do anything. All of those gathered in the room looked at Crazy Hand. What? You have to have a plan. Crazy responded. Whatever. The thing is that I didn't want to have to kill anyone. None of this had to happen. Mark exclaimed. It did, Mark, Master Hand said firmly. There was a beat of silence. Mark's arms were firmly crossed over his chest, as he stared at the contract. It was the very same that let the man live a family man type of life. If he broke it, he'd be cursed with having his family die out before him. He pursed his lips. So? Crazy pestered. Are you gonna stay? We really do need someone to keep those monkeys at bay. Mark was still silent. How would have the elders react if they found him out for this stunt? The elder gods are all dead, Mark. The thought was sudden and hit his head before he knew he had thought it. It was so startling that he had to look around to see if anyone was behind him. Nope. It was all him. He was right, after all. Most of, if not all of the elder gods of this dimension were dead. Long gone from some great big war that had festered. Mark pursed his lips. Fine. I'll stay, Mark finally said, after what felt like an eternity. But only if you meet my conditions. If he could, Master Hand would have smiled. Whatever you want is yours. First, you have to swear that you will never send anyone to the Reset Temple ever again. Clear? Yes, of course. Crazy exclaimed. Secondly, I'm going to need another vacation. I need some time to put all of my unspeakable rage away, and spending some quality time with Nora and the kids would help with that. Done, Master Hand said. There was a pause, and I want better housing for the employees. They might have been created for this job, but that doesn't mean they're animals. Oh. And a coffee machine in the break room. Done and done, the hands said in unison, before clapping together. Forming a director's vision, the hands created a portal back to Mark's home. Enjoy your vacation, Mark. When you return, we will welcome you with open hands. Yeah, if the fighters don't kill me first, Mark muttered to himself, before hopping through the portal. In an instant, the hands closed the portal once more with a powerful clap. Just like that, the office was quiet once again. A beat passed, before Master Hand turned to Crazy. You used the thought implantation thing I taught you, didn't you? Crazy Hand squealed in delight. Oh, you know it. Once more, they clapped. Master Core was utterly confused. After all the adventuring, Link sought to do nothing more than rest. An awful lot has happened since his being brought here. This was not at all how he thought his first tournament was going to go at all. Weary and tired, no matter how much sleep or rest he received, the hero of the wild rested in a comfortable armchair he had found himself resting in on many occasions. Oftentimes, he'd sit here and tinker with his weapons. Occasionally, a friendly face would join him and talk his ear off as he nodded alongside them. Sometimes, his other incarnations came and sat in his presence. Both of them were little children, and they reveled in his technique of cleaning and priming his weapons. It was as if they were taking notes on how to do this whole hero stick. Today, he was not doing anything with his weapons. Instead, he sat, staring up at the ceiling and replaying the memory of the reset temple in his mind. For once, he was not having memory issues. No, he could remember every detail in shocking detail. It was strange what observing so much carnage and destruction could engrave in someone's head, even if that was all in an alternate timeline now. Slack-jawed, Link replayed the events in his head. Soon enough, as was usual around here, someone came to his side. Link hardly made a move. He was too tired to do anything about the newcomer in his territory. He didn't even look their way. It could have been a bokoblin sniffing around for weapons or food, and Link did not give a single Korok seed. That was until something was placed on his head by 4 hands. Confused at first, Link's eyes came down to earth to see what the big deal was all about. A tentative hand went up to his head and touched whatever had been placed on top of him. Were those flowers? Indeed, they were. A crown of flowers had been placed on the hero's head by whoever it was that had come to pay him a visit. Lowering his eyes, he soon found who the culprits were. Alice and that one pig-tailed what was her name again? Kate, he recalled. Tiredly, Link smiled to the two of them, before opening his arms for a hug. The two Ms gave the hero what he had wordlessly asked for. Both pressed into him, and gave him a hug as well. Lightly, he closed his eyes. He loved being a hero just for moments like these. Warmio, you a beautiful bastard, come and give Papa a hug. The Wario had created turned his head towards the sound of the voice. There, in all his beefy glory, stood Wario. Flanking behind him was his tall, lanky partner, Waluigi. Before Warmio could react, he was lifted off the ground by his father. The Mig gave a somewhat distressed look to his accomplice, Waluigi, before returning the hug to Wario. Waluigi looked away from the embarrassing scene of affection, chuckling softly to himself. Oh, what a damn fool. That was, of course, until his creator wrapped him up in a hug. Waluigi made a surprised sound of distress as Waluigi wrapped him tightly in a hug, lifting the already tall off of the ground. Don't you ever die on Amy again, ya hear? I''M.M.A. So happy to have you back. Imagine all the beautiful mischief. Warmio and Waluigi exchanged glances with each other as Wario and Waluigi made fools of themselves. They knew they were in for a rough childhood with these two. Across the way, Male Karn and Cloud watched in awe. Wario and Waluigi have kids? Karn sputtered, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. Who in the world would want to procreate with that? Cloud asked. He was almost disgusted. Wario's fat gut hung out from under his shirt and biker jacket. Waluigi was crying tears of joy, and a long, disgusting snot string had started coming out of his nose. Falco walked into the room to grab himself a glass of milk. As he came in, he spotted Wario and Waluigi reuniting with their children. He blinked twice, before his eyes turned back to the two men at the counter. Fucking. I hope I'm high on birdseed, he muttered to himself. He gestured to the two plumbers. Am I seeing what I think I am? Both Cloud and Karn nodded their heads. Falco let out an exasperated sigh. Wrap it before you tap it, alright? Falco shot at the two of them. With that, he left the room without a glass of milk. Cloud nearly choked. Karn didn't get it. Both were equally afraid for the lives the two Ms were going to live, being raised by those two troublemakers.